5th Congress of the Communist International. The 5th Congress, which met in Moscow between July 17 and September 1, 1928, played a crucial role with respect to the Negro question in the United States. The concept of the American Negro as an oppressed nation had been advanced by Lenin since at least 1915 and had even been incorporated in an official document at the Eind World Congress in 1920. The idea was broached again at subsequent World Congresses, but the concept had been rejected by the American Communists. Now the question was placed on the agenda of the 6th Congress and serious preparations were made for its discussion. Early in the year, the Anglo-American Secretariat of the C appointed a subcommittee to draft a resolution for the consideration of the Negro Commission to be established at the Congress. The commission was to make recommendations to the Congress as a whole on two central points: on the American Negro and on South Africa. According to Harry Haywood, who was a student at the University of the Toilers of the East and later the Lenin School, participated in all phases of the discussion, the position was debated at length both in the preparatory subcommittee and in the Negro Commission. Black Bolshevik, pp. 227-235, 245-268. The subcommittee, which was charged with drawing up a draft resolution, included for the United States 4 blacks. Among them were Haywood and his brother Otto Hall, and Clarence Hathaway, then a student at the Lenin School in Moscow, as well as Nasonov of the Young Communist International, who had visited the United States on behalf of that organization, and who was a strong advocate of the national approach. Participating in the sessions of this committee from time to time were Robert Minor, then representing the American Party in the Comintern, C., and James Ford and William F. Dunn, both of whom were at the Profintern, RILU. Haywood and Nasonov submitted a resolution incorporating the national self-determination view to the subcommittee, which in turn was passed along, together with opposing views, to the Negro Commission of the Congress. As discussion proceeded in the preparatory subcommittee and in the Negro Commission, during and after the Congress, articles representing different viewpoints were published in the Communist International magazine. 4 of these discussion articles follow below, in the order of publication. The first is by Andrei Sheik, Sikh, an Hungarian communist exile who taught at the University of the Toilers of the East and, because of his deep interest in the race question, was close to the black students and had a great influence upon them. In the following excerpt, Sheik insists upon drawing a sharp distinction between race movements and national movements, taking issue on this point with both the theses on the national and colonial question of the Eind Congress and the theses on the Negro question of the 4th Congress. He expounds the position most often opposed to the line of national self-determination, the American Negro is a special social group, a racial minority moving toward full social equality and integration. 163. The Comintern Program and the Racial Problem. By A. Sheik. Hitherto the question of racial oppression and racial movements has unfortunately always been thrust into the background, has been ignored, unnoticed, mistakenly identified with the national colonial question, and mechanically connected with it. The so-called racial problem, as it is treated by reactionary bourgeois sociologists, does not exist for us. The theory of superior and inferior races, of the role of the racial factor in history, and similar conceptions are all pure falsehood. Such things as superior and inferior races do not exist. Of course, there exist inherited, comparatively stable, although not by any means absolutely invariable, physical differences between peoples, which give anthropologists the right to divide the human species into various so-called racial categories according to the color of their skin, the shape of the cranium, and so on. But all these secondary bodily distinctions have no positive relation whatever to the intellectual, moral, and cultural development of peoples. The role of physical racial differences as such is practically non-existent in the history of humanity. Nonetheless, this radically false theory of superior and inferior races is not a simple invention of individual mistaken scientists or blinded politicians. It is the theoretical justification for the racial policy of the definitely exploiter classes. From the foregoing, it is clear that in all 3 instances the racial policy of the exploiters has a concrete economic basis. In the first instance, we are concerned with the oppression and exploitation of certain social groups in their quality as nations, in the other 2 instances with their oppression and exploitation on the verbal basis of their ostensible racial disparity in value, but actually in consequence of the historical development of force relationships between them and the oppressing groups, the Negroes, former slaves, the Jew, a former nation scattered throughout the world. In not one of these cases does either the race, which oppresses, or the race, which is oppressed correspond with the race, of which anthropologists speak. They talk, say, of a yellow race, but not of the race of Chinese, or of a black race, but not of a race of American Negroes, and so on. The race subjected to special oppression represents only a part of the anthropological race, another part of which perhaps is quite unoppressed on a racial basis, the differing position of the Jews in various countries are as oppressed in completely differing ways, the racial oppression of the American Negroes and the national oppression of the African Negro peoples. The establishment of this fact is very important in order to get a clear idea of the radical error in the resolution of the Comintern Fourth Congress dealing with the Negro question, which says that it is necessary to organize a world movement of Negroes, that the American Negroes, especially the Negroes of the North, are the advance guard of the emancipation movement of the entire African race, that the Comintern must set up an international organization of the Negro people. The same resolution says that it is the duty of the Communists to apply these theses on the colonial question to the Negro problem. But at the same time it is clear that it is impermissible simply to identify racial oppression and exploitation with national colonial oppression, that it is impermissible to deal with the racial under a clause on the national question. For when we speak of the oppression of colonial or other subject nations, we have in mind not social groups, formed on the basis of general secondary physical peculiarities, having no practical importance, but groups consolidated by the real bonds of common territory, economic system, language and culture, and striving towards an independent national existence. There is no question of these factors existing among the American Negroes, or say the Hungarian or Polish Jews. John Reed's words, uttered at the Second Congress, to the effect that the Negroes make no demands whatever for national independence, are absolutely true not only for 1920 but for today. Of course, Reed is referring to the American Negroes. All those movements which had as their aim an independent national existence for the Negroes have been failures, as happened with the Back to Africa movement. The Negroes regard themselves as Americans and feel quite at home in the United States. This question is of great importance because the American Negroes, like the whole American nation of which they are members, are divided into classes. To the Negro worker and poor peasant all thought of national independence is foreign. Moreover, the Negro bourgeois is not averse to having a monopoly in the super-exploitation of the millions of toilers of his own race. It is the colored bourgeoisie who invent all sorts of legends and a special Negro culture, the brotherhood of the whole African race, and similar nonsense. One cannot understand why these terms could have found their way into the Fourth Congress resolution. It is they who project the various nationalist movements of Negroes demanding self-determination. But communists should not allow themselves to be caught in such snares. They should put forward demands on behalf of the oppressed American Negroes not as a nation, but as a race, and the same applies to the oppressed Jews in certain capitalist countries, and they should demand not the right to national self-determination. Self-determination has no practical meaning here but complete political and social equality. But an enormous revolutionary role can be played, and always is played, by the anti-imperialist racial emancipation movement of the workers and the petty bourgeois masses of a racial minority, directed by the proletariat. The petty bourgeoisie, who waver between the revolutionary anti-imperialist proletariat and the counter-revolutionary bourgeoisie, cannot have an independent movement. Communists should support and organize such a racial movement by all means, but on no account should they support any form of Negro movement, as the Fourth Congress resolution says, nor the international racial movement against capitalism and imperialism, in the same resolution. The latter movement cannot exist in nature, for as we have seen above, such a movement can be only bourgeois and reactionary. In the United States more than 10 million Negroes represent an enormous reserve for the revolutionary proletariat of America, one that can be a mighty ally in its struggle against American capitalism. In order to transform this potential into an actual ally, the C.P. should work out a corresponding revolutionary strategy and tactics in regard to the Negroes and their movement. The basic strategic task is to safeguard the hegemony of the proletariat in the emancipation movement of the race, consolidating the great masses of the oppressed racial minority around the party in the form of a non-party mass racial organization, under the leadership of communists. To this end it is necessary to ensure the confidence of the Negro masses in the party. And this cannot be achieved otherwise than by way of bringing certain activities to the forefront as part of the militant tasks of the party. Such activities should be the re-education of the white workers and of the communists themselves in the first place, in order to speed up the process of outliving racial prejudices, with at the same time a declaration of a ruthless ideological struggle against such prejudices within the party and within other workers' organizations under party influence, and also the concentration of special attention on the racial question in the everyday struggle of the party. The Communist International, August 15, 1928. On the question of the work of the American Communist Party among Negroes, discussion article, by James Ford and William Wilson, William L. Patterson. William L. Patterson, writing here under the name of William Wilson, was a student at the University of the Toilers of the East when the Sixth Congress took place. Born in 1891 in San Francisco, he graduated law school in 1919, and as a young lawyer in New York he joined the fight to save Sacco and Vanzetti in 1926. He was to become an outstanding black communist leader. In this article Ford and Patterson, without mentioning the alternative national approach, consider the American Negro an oppressed racial minority, and argue vehemently against support for any nationalist movement. They hold that class division among the Negro people renders a united movement impossible. The main task, they write, is overcoming prejudice among the white workers to make a united working class movement possible, although they argue effectively against the Socialist Party position that the Negro question is merely a class question. And despite their rejection of the nationality approach, they urge the creation of a mass race organization of black workers and petty bourgeois masses, devoid of the narrowness and sectarianism of the American Negro. Labor Congress, which they consider merely a duplicate of the party and insignificant. Finally, they urge strongly a day-to-day struggle against white chauvinism in the Communist Party, with firm measures against it, including exclusion from the party. The Communist Party and the Negro race movement. The American Communist Party must initiate a revolutionary race policy. It must support with all its strength the freedom fight of the working people of the oppressed racial minority. That is demanded by the interests of the proletarian revolution in the struggle for the overthrow of imperialism, which in the United States has as one of its pillars the exploitation of the toiling Negroes. Their fight for full equal political and social rights is a struggle against imperialism. As long as the vanguard of the revolutionary proletariat, T-E Communist Party, and not the opportunistic Negro bourgeois, stands at the head of this militant movement, it can and must become an important revolutionary factor. The wavering petty bourgeoisie which stands between the revolutionary anti-imperialist proletariat and the reactionary bourgeoisie is unable to carry on an independent movement. The position of the party with respect to every opportunist or chauvinist separatist race movement must be negative. The party must carry on active propaganda among the Negro workers and poor farmers to explain the reactionary bourgeois character of such movements and show that they support the exploitive interests of the ruling classes, that instead of eliminating the inequalities between blacks and whites they prolong them. No communist should be a member of such an organization. On the contrary, the Communist Party must do its best to free from the bourgeois leaders the misguided masses of workers and working petty bourgeois which belong to these organizations, induce them to leave and join the revolutionary race movement led by the Communist Party. But this does not mean that the Communist Party and the class and race organizations it leads should not support such organizations in the struggle for common demands of a class character on certain questions, or not form a common front with them as long as it is a matter of realizing a progressive program that can lead to full social equality of the Negro. However, such cooperation should in no case be considered a departure of the party from its principled negative position with respect to such organizations. On questions of principle there can be no compromise, no concession. Entirely inadmissible would be any concession whatever in favor of separatist chauvinist movements. The Communist Party must frankly and openly oppose such movements, it must expose their reactionary bourgeois character and must energetically and definitively reject the separatist principle. The party must take special pains to counter the widely held view that the splintering of the Negro movement is brought about by the failings of the leaders, their inability, their careerism, etc. The Negro working masses must become aware that the splintering is neither accidental nor arbitrary. The division of the oppressed Negro race into classes means a united race movement can never be attained, because the Negro bourgeoisie will never participate consistently in a struggle led by the proletariat for the full freedom of the black working people from the yoke of exploitation. The unification of the entire Negro people under the leadership of the bourgeoisie would mean the abandonment of a real revolutionary struggle against the racist policy of the white bourgeoisie. Communist Party recruiting among Negroes. The victory of the revolution in the United States is unthinkable as long as the Communist Party does not have the support of the majority of the various advanced sectors of both the Negro and the white proletariat of city and countryside. Moreover, it is impossible to have the support of the majority of the various strata of the black proletariat and semi-proletariat as long as the vanguard of the black workers are not in the party. The difficulties of party propaganda in the given, objective situation, are not to be denied, for example, the backwardness and lack of education of the Negro workers, the antagonism between black and white workers, the mistrust of the former and the prejudice of the latter. The prospects for recruitment among Negroes are better because of the boundless oppression and exploitation of the Negro worker. For the party, the organization of the Negro for the revolutionary struggle is easier and can be more successful than the organization of the white worker, who suffers much less under the yoke of capital than the super-exploited Negro worker. If the black working masses are backward and uneducated, this does not mean that the party must give up their recruitment. On the contrary, it must exert special efforts to develop the Negro ideologically and obtain his adherence to the party, or else the party will inevitably be reduced to a sect of revolutionary intellectuals. The competitive struggle between the white and the black workers must not be viewed as an objective economic factor that is indispensable to the capitalist system. This competition is nothing else than the result of the ideological influence of the bourgeoisie on the proletariat. That will remain just as long as the white workers do not free themselves of race prejudice. The sooner the white American workers overcome their race prejudice and unite with the blacks, the sooner will the American labor organizations give up their racist policies and admit the Negro to their ranks, and support and defend the Negro workers equally with the white. The competitive struggle will vanish, and the American bourgeoisie will no longer be able to maintain the system of double exploitation which it created. Obviously, the revolutionizing of the entire American working class is no small or rapid thing. The American Communist Party is still too weak to overcome the great difficulties along the way. Among the white workers, the race prejudice against their black class brothers implanted by the bourgeoisie is widespread, and the revolutionary duty of the Communist Party consists not in supporting this bias but in fighting it. If, in view of the extent of prejudice among the backward white workers, the task of drawing the mass of black workers to the party were to be abandoned, this would be the worst kind of Kavostism, tailing after the masses, which is denounced by Bolshevism, and for which revolutionary principles would be sacrificed in favor of reaction. Instead of avoiding the problem because of objective difficulties, the American communists must do their utmost to overcome the objective difficulties and eradicate race prejudice, at least in their own ranks and in the ranks of the workers' organizations they lead. By a correct revolutionary policy on the Negro question, they could overcome the distrust among the black working masses of the Communist Party and thereby also remove the obstacles which stand in the way of the black workers joining the party. On the need for a mass race organization for Negro workers. The Communist Party must form a non-party Negro mass organization within which a Negro worker who has not yet overcome his hostility to whites and to whom the Communist Party still seems alien, has the opportunity to learn the teachings of Marx and Lenin, and where he can convince himself the Communist Party is free of all race prejudice, that is one of the workers most exploited by capital. He shares with the exploited white workers the very aims and efforts of the Communists. The founding of such an organization is especially necessary because the overcoming of the distrust of white communists among broad masses of black workers can take place only outside the party, precisely because this is the main obstacle which prevents the black worker from joining the party. The non-party Negro mass organization must be a race organization. It is not possible in one blow to make communists out of unorganized, backward black workers. It is necessary to bridge the gulf between the Communist Party and the Negro masses, to which end it is first necessary to build an organization whose aims and activity these masses accept and understand, despite their mistrust of whites. Such a role can be undertaken only by such an organization which the oppressed Negro, though not yet class conscious, feels to be his own and to which he is drawn. The black proletarian as a rule is conscious of his race oppression, but he is not conscious of his class solidarity with the white workers. With some exceptions, the most advanced elements of the black proletariat who have to some degree a class feeling think of themselves first as a Negro then as a worker. They would shun an organization that makes its appeal to him simply as a worker. It is necessary to affect his ideology, his race consciousness, and in this way bring him under our influence. A non-party Negro mass organization must unite not only the workers but also the broad masses, including the black small bourgeoisie and in the first place the peasants. Objections have been raised to the forming of a mass Negro race organization which includes both the proletariat and the working petty bourgeoisie, and the attempt is made to hide this opportunist position with left phrases. We will take up some of these objections. 1. Some say that all contradictions in class society are to be traced back to the class conflict. Every social struggle is a class struggle. And the race question is a class question, an economic question. We must therefore organize the black workers on economic class grounds, without reference to the race problem invented by the bourgeoisie. It is quite obvious that this is not Marxism, but a parody of Marxism. To be sure, Exploitation and oppression basically have an economic and class character. But this does not mean that race oppression and class oppression are congruent. The Communist Party, which fights against every kind of oppression and exploitation, cannot be satisfied with the struggle against the exploitation of the black worker as a worker or the black poor farmer as a poor farmer, but it must also fight for their social and political equal rights. The class demands alone are not enough to weld together the backward Negro masses who do not yet understand that the class demands of the workers, the working farmers and the petty bourgeoisie, are parallel. The above-mentioned position on the race question is not only un-Marxist and unscientific but is a marked reactionary stand which is supported by the opportunist Socialist Party and the reformists. If the class struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie is the only struggle that matters, then every struggle for the social equality of the oppressed race is superfluous and detrimental and can only hamper the main struggle. The Negro should wait for socialism. The liberated proletariat will free all the oppressed, among them the Negro people in America. 2. Those who subscribe to the above view contend that a new race organization is not needed since there already exists a class race organization of the black workers, the National Negro Labor Congress. But the Labor Congress can in no way fill the role of an organization for revolutionizing the broad masses of the Negro proletariat, if merely on the ground that it includes only Negro workers but not the working petty bourgeoisie of city and village. Experience has shown that this organization is unfitted even for attracting the black workers. There is no doubt anymore today that the work of this organization must be judged entirely insignificant. The reasons for the mistakes of the Labor Congress have been discussed often. It is not important to prove what mistakes the party made in realizing the idea of a Labor Congress, but it is important to prove whether or not such an idea in itself was correct. Everyone must concede that it is not the shortcomings in the building and work of this organization but the idea itself, the principle of this organization, which led to its failure. The Labor Congress is a political organization of the vanguard of the black workers. Its program is the same as that of the Communist Party. Its tasks differ from those of the Communist Party only in that it brings into political activity not the vanguard of the entire working class but only the vanguard of its black sector. In this way, the Labor Con-Res appears as a Negro Communist Party separate from the American Party, a principle basically rejected by Leninism. A revolutionary political organization of the working class can only be one political organization of the vanguard of the proletariat. Division into national, race and other groups contradicts the interest of the revolution and splits the proletariat instead of uniting it. 3. It is also said that a race organization of all working Negroes is of no use since such petty bourgeois and workers that may get together with themselves strive to become bourgeois and in the ideological sense would have a harmful influence upon the proletarian elements. In general, there is to be found among both petty bourgeois and workers many people who dream of becoming capitalists. If because of this effort to win over such people for the revolutionary struggle under the influence of the Communist Party were given up, this would mean to reject the revolution itself. Our task, however, is to free the small bourgeoisie and especially the working class from the influence of the bourgeoisie. If we do not take over the leadership of the working middle class and the proletariat associated with it, regardless of the extent of a proletarian ideology among them, the bourgeoisie will organize them under its banner. 4. There is still another great objection to the formation of a black race organization. It would lead in the South to the separation of the black landworkers and small and middle peasants from the whites. It is held that the Communist Party should organize the agricultural laborers as such in the struggle against the landowners and not the black peasantry on a race basis, just as the workers as such should be organized against capitalism. To be sure, the party seeks to organize all workers against capitalism, the most advanced among them into the party, others into the trade unions, the farmers, regardless of the color of the skin, into cooperatives, and to win others for communist-led organizations. Even so, as things are now, we mean the existing relations in the South between the whites and the blacks, it would be utopian to speak of bringing a substantial number of Negroes into the Communist Party or even a few into the same organization with whites. If in the organization of Negroes we were to depart from the necessity and principle of a common organization, we would renounce any practical organizational work among Negroes. The Communist Party and race prejudice. Revolutionary communism does not tolerate any race prejudice whatever, recognizes no race privileges, no race division, no inequality or segregation of races. Before the coming of socialism, a final uprooting of race prejudice among the workers is unthinkable. But anyone who considers utopian the definite eradication of race prejudice in the Communist Party and among its members before the coming of socialism, belongs to the petty bourgeois socialists and not to the communists. A communist party in which race prejudice still exists is a communist party only in name. Bolshevization of the party, however, demands a complete crusade against all prejudice. Without this, the Communist Party cannot claim the right to its name, nor can it lead correctly the revolutionary proletariat. The complete overcoming of race prejudice is a prerequisite for success in winning the advanced sector of the black workers for the party and the attraction of the broad masses of the Negro workers and farmers to active participation in the revolutionary struggle led by the Communist Party for the defeat of American capitalism. The communist must free himself of all race prejudice not only in political life but in his private life as well. The private life of a communist cannot be separated from his revolutionary activity. He is as responsible before the party for his private life as for his political behavior. A true revolutionary cannot limit his activity to this or the other field. Just as it is impossible for a religious person to be a good communist, neither can any communist unable to overcome his race prejudice lay claim to that honorable name. We cannot force anyone to give up his race prejudice just as we cannot by force deprive him of his religious beliefs. But those people who cannot on their own give up religious beliefs or race prejudice are not fit to be communists, and no one can force us to tolerate them in the party. The overcoming of race prejudice is not only a matter of principle embodied in the communist position on the race question and the duty of a party member with regard to the Negro. It means overcoming of race prejudice in practice. Not only the maltreatment of the Negro, in word or in deed, it is the same thing, but every toleration of discrimination against him is impermissible for a party member. The duty of the party consists not only in showing its members that race prejudice is intolerable, but in helping them completely to uproot this bourgeois heritage in practice, by means of work and struggle in common of white and black workers, men and women, and at the same time by means of a comradely social intercourse in daily life. As long as an inner, comradely relation between white and black communists is not established, the American Communist Party cannot become a true Bolshevik party. The task of uprooting race prejudice must in the interests of the American Communist Party be placed on the practical order of the day. The work of educating the white workers, in the first place the communists themselves, must be put in the foreground, and all race prejudice that remains in the party and other workers' organizations must be fought with might and main. The Communist Party must take the utmost care to prevent in its organization the occurrence of any bourgeois, unequal or obnoxious acts against the Negro. To be sure, if a little developed member is involved, extreme measures should not be taken. If the act is not openly malicious, a reprimand would be enough for the first time, showing him how impermissible such acts are for a communist, and ideological discussion at a party meeting, etc. But such treatment is absolutely not in place in the case of a responsible party functionary or an intellectual party member. An intellectual, whether he has a responsible post in the party or not, must immediately be expelled from the party for the slightest expression of race prejudice. If a party functionary's act is shown to be malicious, he must be expelled. If the party organization itself is responsible for an anti-Negro act, e.g., the exclusion of Negroes from a meeting, the responsible leader of the organization in question should be relieved of his work and, depending upon the seriousness of his offense, even expelled. Without carrying through such measures, it is impossible to prevent the outbreak of race fanaticism in the party, and consequently also negate the main objective of bringing the black workers to the party and interesting the broad masses of the black working people in the struggle against American capitalism. A communist party which tolerates race prejudice in its ranks, a communist party which does not understand that the most exploited and most oppressed masses must be drawn into the revolutionary movement and that their most advanced representatives must be won for its own ranks, is not a communist party. An American Communist Party without Negroes is only a parody of a Bolshevik party. Die Kommunistische Internationale, August 29, 1928, pp. 2132-2146. Translation from the German. The Negro Problem and the Tasks of the Communist Party of the United States. By Harry Haywood. Harry Haywood did not speak at any session of the Congress, but he did work closely with Nasonov of the Young Communist International in the Preparatory Subcommittee and in the Negro Commission of the Congress. The following article written in connection with the discussions is among the earliest published expositions of the position finally adopted by the Communist International. It is certainly the best reasoned and documented presentation until then of the view that the American Negro is an oppressed nation entitled to the right of self-determination. The V Congress of the Communist International has established a special Negro Subcommittee, Negro Commission, of the Colonial Commission, which is charged with the task of considering the Negro problem in its international aspects. The question of our work among the Negroes in the United States played a role in the program of this subcommittee, explicitly the following problem. 1. Although it is the task of the colored workers of the United States to give leadership to the revolutionary struggles of the Negroes of the entire world against imperialism. 2. It is precisely on the basic question of the nature of the problem in the United States that differences of opinion have arisen. Lenin on the Negro question in the United States. It is interesting that Lenin, in an accompanying note to his theses on the national and colonial question, which he presented to the Eind Congress of the Comintern, said the following: I would request all comrades, especially those who possess concrete information on any of these very complicated problems, to let me have their opinions, amendments, addenda and concrete remarks in the most concise form. No more than 2 or 3 pages, particularly on the following points. Among these very complicated problems about which Lenin sought further information, he included the Negro question in America. Moreover, Lenin had dealt with the Negro problem in America in his work, Capitalism and Agriculture in America, which he wrote in 1913 and in which he discussed fully the Negro question in relation to agriculture in the Southern 1 volt. I. Lenin, Selected Works, Volume 3, International. Publishers, 1967, page 422. States. Point 2. In the theses of the two Congress on the national and colonial question, Lenin places the Negroes in America as a subject nation, alongside Ireland, and mentions their movement among the national revolutionary movements that communist parties should support. The nature of the problem: the Negroes in the United States are not a colonial people, nor are they a nation, but they are a race. That is the opinion advanced by various comrades who have concerned themselves with the problem. In reality, this formulation is extremely superficial. When one is satisfied with the definition of Negro problem not as national but a race problem, one fails to recognize the special characteristics of the Negro problem in America which gives rise to its national quality. To be sure, Negroes of the United States are, indeed, not a nation in the usual meaning of the word. But with this assertion the problem is by no means settled. A deeper analysis is necessary, as the theses of the two Congress says. The Communist Party must base its policy on the national question, too, not on abstract and formal principles but, first, on a precise appraisal of the specific historic situation, and, primarily on economic conditions. 11.3. If we follow this advice, we find that the Negroes were brought as slaves to America from various African regions with different languages and dialects and different cultures. Only through their common history of slavery and deprivation of civil rights were they brought together as apart from the white population. Their history and the oppression of all kinds under which they now live has made them distrustful, suspicious and full of hatred of whites and has given rise among them to a strong separatist tendency. The greater part of the Negro population, 86.1% out of 12 million, live in the southern states, where they constitute more than a third of the total population. The great mass of Negroes, 66% of the total, live in agrarian regions, and earn their livelihood from various agricultural occupations. More than a third of the Negro population in the South live in the so-called Black Belt, or close by, where they are more than half the population. This Black Belt, which naturally has no formal state designation and lacks defined boundaries, runs through 5 different states and includes 214 counties, of which some have a colored population as high as 90% of the total. All statistics are from the census of 1920. Furthermore, the bourgeois statistics undercount the Negro population in these regions. The great mass of Negroes is the victim of a system of exploitation of a semi-feudal character. Side by side with the highly developed form of capitalist exploitation, American imperialism makes use of those forms left over from slavery, sharecropping, debt peonage, etc., to extract extra profits. Out of the relations at the time of slavery and those developed between white and Negro after the emancipation of the slaves, a new situation of economic and social inequality has arisen which to see Lenin in the United States. Selection from his writings, International Publishers, 1970, pp. 115-205. 3. Lenin, Selected Works, Volume 3, page 423. Finds its expression in lynch law, etc. This system seeks its justification in the theory of the inherent inferiority of the Negro race. Many comrades consider the Negro question in America a question of a social group based upon different physiological traits, and that the Negroes are separated from the whites by merely artificial race differentiation. But this view amounts to misunderstanding the historically founded relation between the two races and places the question in the manner of bourgeois liberals who mislead the masses by professing to fight against race prejudice while they carefully evade its economic and historical basis. Such a treatment of the problem has nothing to do with Leninism. The race question in America is not only that of a social group formed on the basis of physiological peculiarities, nor are the differences between the races merely artificial. The Negro question in America arises from a combination of economic, social and political relations between blacks and whites that went through a development of over 350 years and specifically on the basis of the offensive exploitation of the black race by a powerful nation. By dint of this enslavement, the Negroes developed the characteristic traits of a national minority. It is therefore no wonder that all these comrades overlook the South, that they overlook the fact that the roots of the Negro question lie in the unresolved agrarian question of the South. They seek to present the Negro question merely as the question of the Negro in the industrial centers of the North. They overlook the connection between the agrarian problem of the South and the labor market of the North. It is a Marxist axiom that the labor market in all countries is influenced by the situation of the peasantry. That is in any case correct in the United States. The poor Negro farmer, from a situation of absolute inhuman exploitation and accustomed to a low living standard, migrates to the northern cities and out of physical necessity depresses the market with his cheap labor. With the growing movement of Negroes to the north in great masses, antagonism between the races also grows. From this results the establishment of separate schools even in some northern states, separate housing, etc. As long as remnants of slavery exist in southern agriculture, so long can American capitalism count on the Negro to supply cheap labor. The Negroes in the North draw the lowest wages because of their exploited situation in southern agriculture. Therefore, we cannot find the roots of the Negro problem in the North. Their real economic roots lie in the agrarian question in the South. Precisely, the colored land workers and tenants are the ones who suffer the greatest burden of exploitation by whites. It is the peasant question which forms the basis of the Negro nationality question. It is impossible to solve the Negro question without freeing the half-enslaved population of the South from the pre-capitalist forms of exploitation. This task, naturally, can be performed only by the proletarian revolution. Oppression and persecution in their various forms, and the fact that Negroes live in large masses in the agrarian regions of the South and in separate quarters in the cities of the North as well as in the South, create the necessary preconditions for the development of a national revolutionary movement of Negroes. From this viewpoint and from no other must we approach the question. To believe that the Negro peasantry constitute a reserve army for capitalist reaction, that only through proletarianization will they become a reserve army of the proletarian revolution means to misunderstand the basic teachings of Marx and Lenin on the peasant question. Even in their immediate situation must the colored peasantry be seen as a strong revolutionary force which under the leadership of the proletariat will fight against imperialism. The Negro petty bourgeoisie and intellectuals. The Negro middle class, which arose in the epoch of monopoly capitalism and imperialism, could not develop to any extent into a strong bourgeoisie. It is in the main only a commercial petty bourgeoisie with small enterprises and with limited capital. As concerns the intellectuals, they must depend for their existence on the broad masses of Negroes. Their field of action is limited to the Negro masses. The system of race separation protects the Negro businessman with his shrunken capital and small shop from the competition of the whites. In general, whites do not buy from the Negro and do not seek the services of Negro intellectuals. On the other hand, Negroes can buy in most white establishments. For this reason the Negro petty bourgeoisie is interested in the maintenance of race prejudice since it assures it a monopoly in supplying the Negro masses. Therefore its constant appeal for support of the masses and the constant call for race loyalty and solidarity. Under the growing pressure of white competition which hampers its own development, the Negro petty bourgeoisie strives for the establishment of a kind of independent autonomy of the Negro to protect it from white competition. This ideal of the Negro petty bourgeoisie is not limited to the United States but seeks the development of economic relations abroad involving the Negroes of the entire world, the Pan-African Congress, the Garvey movement, etc. Furthermore, the Negro petty bourgeoisie is interested in raising the purchasing power of the Negro masses, for that is the prerequisite for its own advance. Its interests appear as the defense of the economic interests of the masses, through which over time a certain faith in the middle class developed among the masses. Thus, also arises its almost complete dominance over the Negro masses. The feeling of togetherness among the Negroes of the United States, which had its source in oppression and segregation, is the best ground for the development of an ideology which harmonizes with the interests of the petty bourgeoisie. Race loyalty and race pride are preached by every means, in press and church. Thus the Negro intellectuals have to create an historic foundation in which they incorporate the old African culture and the whole list of historical persons. In the cultural field, the Negro intellectuals are pushing into the foreground Negro art, Negro music, Negro literature, the products of which are not entirely differentiated from the culture of the ruling race. But they do bear the stamp of the distinctive conditions under which the Negro lives. Before long, elements of a nationalistic ideology are at hand. Negro nationalism in the United States. Aspects of Negro nationalism in the United States first became apparent with the growth of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the Garvey movement. This movement, which was organized in 1916 by Marcus Garvey, a West Indian Negro, became the biggest radical organization which until then had been formed by Negroes in the United States. At its high point it counted 200,000 members in the United States, and it influenced many hundred thousands more. While its leaders came from the middle class and the intellectuals, most of its members were peasants and new industrial workers. At the center of its program was the slogan, "Back to Africa," and the establishment of a state on the Dark Continent for all the Negroes of the world. Together with this there were a number of small business enterprises such as the Black Star Line, production cooperatives, the Ethiopian Engineer Society, etc. In the organizational structure of the movement, with Garvey as provisional president of Africa, with his royal court, and his army and marine staffs, the embryonic form of a state is clearly evident. At the same time they went on to create a history of the Negro and a black religion, and above all to idolize everything black. A Negro national hymn was composed and poems to Africa, the motherland, were written. A strong separatist strain pervaded all the propaganda and activity of the movement. After 1920 demands were also raised on behalf of the economic and social needs of the Negro in the United States, and they built various business and cooperative enterprises which were to show all the Negroes in the world the way to economic and political independence. Following the change in the objective situation, the movement began to decline after 1923, the masses fell away. Together with that, emphasis was placed more and more on the slogan of Back to Africa, while the program for a determined struggle in the United States fell into the background. Garvey is not to be seen as the founder of a Negro nationalism, he was an early symbol of the sentiment of the masses. The Garvey movement crystallized in itself the powerful nationalist sentiment of the Negroes. Under the special critical and oppressive conditions in which the movement developed, a fundamental change occurred and a genuine nationalist movement arose. Under the leadership of the Negro petty bourgeoisie, however, the revolutionary energy of the masses was turned away from the struggle in the United States and dissipated in the reactionary course of Back to Africa. The following lessons can be drawn from this movement. 1. That separatist tendencies are present among the Negro masses which become stronger in periods of crisis. 2. Only the leadership of the Negro proletariat can give a revolutionary direction to such movements. The Negro proletariat and the tasks of the Communist Party. During the last decade and especially since 1916, thousands of Negroes were drawn to the great industrial cities of the North and South. A black industrial proletariat of about 2 million has arisen. Some comrades are inclined to overemphasize the significance of this migration and to base our policy upon the idea that the peasantry is being proletarianized instead of working among them where they are. These comrades have the perspective that the mass migration of Negroes will continue as up to now, that the Negro masses of the South will very soon lose their compactness, and that the mechanization of agriculture now proceeding in the South will lead to the overcoming of the semi-feudal remnants. Thereupon the entire Negro question is automatically solved by the logical process of capitalist development, even before the revolution. The reformist position of these comrades leads them to an underestimation of the peasantry, to reducing the Negro question to a question of the proletariat in the industrial centers, and above all to ignoring the racial or national significance of the Negro movement. No wonder that these comrades oppose the slogan of self-determination of the Negro. It is noteworthy that the Negro population has been concentrated at all times in the southern states, 91.9%. Of the total Negro population in 1870, 89% in 1910, and 86% in 1920, and that, as already pointed out, live in certain areas of great density. In spite of the migration, 80% of the Negroes in 1920 still live in their native state. At its high moment in the future, industrialization of agriculture will reduce the density of the Negro population, but this is making rapid progress only in the New South, west of the Mississippi, while in the Old South, where the Negroes live in compact masses and where the Black Belt is located, it is proceeding at a very slow pace as a result of the structure of agriculture which, for example, hinders the use of the mechanical cotton picker. In addition, a meaningful rationalization process accompanied by a reduction of the workforce and prevailing deeply rooted economic factors hinder the broad expansion of the industrial centers for the immediate future. Nevertheless, one must keep in mind that while maturing capitalism tends to uproot all pre-capitalist relations, imperialism or declining capitalism tends to perpetuate them in order to realize super profits. The colored peasantry, which is subject to inhuman exploitation, provides American imperialism with a source of great extra profits. Only the proletarian revolution is able to fully uproot the remnants of slavery and to liberate the Negro masses in the agrarian regions of the South from the bonds of oppression. Only a social democratic reformist can construct a policy on the assumption that all these conditions will vanish under the rule of capitalism. In view of the rapid migration of Negroes into industry and the creation of a strong proletariat, the policy of the party must base itself in the first place upon this new force. The advantageous position of this proletariat enables it to provide leadership for all national revolutionary movements. The colored working class has reached a stage of development which enables it, given good leadership and strong organization, to perform successfully two historic missions. 1. In class struggle against American imperialism is an important basic sector of the American working class and in full cooperation. 2. To take over the leadership of the oppressed Negro masses. To fulfill this mission, it is the duty of the Negro proletariat to mobilize the broad masses of the Negro population and to organize the struggle of the Negro landworkers and tenants against semi-feudal oppression in all its aspects. At the same time, the Communist Party must come forward as the vanguard fighter for the rights of the oppressed Negro race and for full independence. While raising and fighting for full equal social and political rights for the Negro, in view of the above-mentioned factors leading to a national revolutionary movement, the party must support without reserve the right of national self-determination up to separation and the erection of an independent Negro state. This struggle for equal rights and self-determination must be tied in with economic demands, especially those directed against the remnants of slavery and all forms of race and national oppression. The party and the white chauvinism. A radical change in the tactics of the Communist Party is necessary if it is to carry out its tasks with respect to the black workers. The resolution of the Central Committee of April 30th on Negro work declares that the party in general has not understood sufficiently the importance of work among Negroes. It goes without saying that such a general declaration on the faults of the party in its Negro work is welcome. However, a sharp self-criticism with regard to our party's Negro work is necessary. It must always keep in mind that an uncompromising struggle must be waged against white chauvinism through which the ideological influence of American imperialism is impressed upon the working people and dominates not only certain strata of workers in the United States but is to be found in multiple forms even in the party. The party must use all means at its disposal to fight white chauvinism. Party schools, the party press, every public meeting must be used to counteract the opposition, even the indifference, of white comrades to work among Negroes. This is educational work which must be carried on together with a campaign to mobilize white workers and poor farmers for struggle in support of the demands of the Negro workers. In connection with this, the party should always remember the words of Comrade Lenin, who said, "In the international education of the workers of the oppressor countries, emphasis must necessarily be laid on their advocating freedom for the oppressed countries to secede and their fighting for it. It is our right and duty to treat every social democrat of an oppressor nation who fails to conduct such propaganda as a scoundrel and an imperialist." 4. From this standpoint, the party must consider as one of its main tasks in its Negro work to organize the colored workers and farmers and draw these oppressed masses into the proletarian revolutionary class struggle, remembering the works of the resolution of the Second Congress that complete victory over capitalism cannot be won unless the proletariat and, following it, the mass of working people in all countries and nations of the world voluntarily strive for alliance and unit. 5. Die Kommunistische Internationale, September 5, 1928, pp. 2253-2262. Translated from the German. American Negro Problems. By John Pepper. John Pepper, Jospe Pogany, an Hungarian communist who participated in the short-lived Bela Kun revolutionary government in post-war Hungary, came to the United States in the early 1920s as a representative of the Communist International to the American Party. He remained to become part of the top Communist Party leadership here, identifying himself with the Ruthenberg-Lovestone faction. The lengthy article condensed below was published in the Communist of October 1928 and was also published as a pamphlet under the same title, Workers' Library Publishers, New York, 1928. Actually, the article was written in connection with the discussions in the Negro Commission of the Sixth Congress and first appeared in Die Kommunistische Internationale, official organ of the C, September 5, 1928, the same issue which 4 volts. I. Lenin, the discussion on self-determination. Summed up, in National Liberation, Socialism and Imperialism. Selected Writings, International Publishers. New York, 1968, page 157. 5 Lenin, Selected Works, Volume 3, page 427. Carried Harry Haywood's article, above. No mention is made of the circumstances under which the article was written and was first published, either in the Communist or the pamphlet, and none of the author-tilde discussion articles were republished here. Thus, the question of the Negro people as a subject nation with the right of self-determination was raised for the first time in American party literature and assumed the authority of party policy, even before the C resolution on that theme was known to the membership or the public, and without any discussion in the American Party. The premature publication of Pepper's article without any explanation was obviously a factional move intended to credit the Lovestone Group with initiating the new position. A number of propositions in the Pepper article were rejected by the C. Negro Commission. His concept of the Black Belt of the South as a colony of the United States and his call for a Soviet Negro Republic in the South. Particularly in sections of the article not given here, Lengthy parts are taken word for word from the party election platform of 1928 without acknowledgement. And Pepper still refers to the racial caste system as a fundamental feature of U.S. society. As a sea worker, Pepper was recalled to Moscow in 1929 and expelled from the party for violating discipline by delaying his return and for financial irregularities. The Black Belt of the South, with its starving and pauperized Negro farmers and Negro agricultural working masses, with its Jim Crowism, its semi-feudal status and its political system still bearing the earmarks of the period of slavery, constitutes virtually a colony within the body of the United States of America. The super profits extracted from this Negro colony are one of the most important sources of the growth of American imperialism. The oppression of the Negro race is one of the most important bases of the government apparatus of American capitalism. The prejudices created in the minds of large sections of the white workers against the Negroes are the most dangerous obstacles to the unity of the American working class. The slogan of self-determination, the Workers' Communist Party of America puts forward correctly as its central slogan. Abolition of the whole system of race discrimination. Full racial, social and political equality for the Negro people. But it is necessary to supplement the struggle for the full racial, social and political equality of the Negroes with a struggle for their right of national self-determination. Self-determination means the right to establish their own state, to erect their own government, if they choose to do so. In the economic and social conditions and class relations of the Negro people there are increasing forces which serve as a basis for the development of a Negro nation, a compact mass of farmers on a contiguous territory, semi-feudal conditions, complete segregation, common traditions of slavery, the development of distinct classes and economic ties, etc., etc. It is true, the Negro people in the United States have not their own language as distinct from the language of the oppressing white nation, but there is a certain amount of special Negro culture. There is still alive the common, deep-rooted tradition of the bitter centuries of slavery. There is developing a new Negro literature and press. First of all, we must consider the compact Negro farming masses of the Black Belt as the political basis for a national liberation movement of the Negroes and as the basis for the realization of the right of self-determination of a Negro state. Despite growing migration to the north, in 1920 there were still over 3 million Negroes who constituted a majority of the population in 219 counties over a contiguous area in the Black Belt. There are many national movements of the Negro city petite bourgeoisie and intelligentsia. The fact that the most important mass movement of this kind, the Garvey movement, was a sort of Negro Zionism and had such reactionary, extremely harmful slogans as leaving the United States and back to Africa, should not blind us to the revolutionary possibilities of the Negro national liberation movements of the future. The Workers' Communist Party of America must come out openly and unreservedly for the right of national self-determination for the Negroes, but at the same time the Communist Party must state sharply that the realization of this self-determination cannot be secured under the present relations of power under capitalism. National self-determination for the Negro is a bourgeois democratic demand, but it can be realized only in the course of the proletarian revolution. The abolition of the half-feudal, half-slave remnants in the South will also be only a byproduct, Lenin, of the general proletarian revolution. It would be a major mistake to believe that there can be any other revolution in imperialist America, in the country of the most powerful, most centralized and concentrated industry, than a proletarian revolution. First published in Die Kommunistische Internationale, September 5, 1928. The above is excerpted from the English version in The Communist, October, 1928, pp. 628-937. 5th Congress, Opposing Views. The Negro Commission of the Congress had 32 delegates from 18 countries, among them the United States, South Africa, Great Britain, France, Germany, India, and Palestine, with Otto Kuusinen, a Finnish communist exile living in the Soviet Union, as chairman. The U.S. delegation included 5 blacks: Haywood, Otto Hall, Jim Farmer, Roy Mahoney, James Ford, and Harold Williams. Alexander Biddleman and J. Lovestone, each representing the opposing factions in the party, were also on the commission. Here the two central viewpoints were debated: the American Negro as racial minority or as oppressed nation. Haywood was the only American black to support the latter position. The strongest opposition came from James Ford and Otto Hall. As Haywood recalls it, Foster, Biddleman and Dunn, as well as John Pepper, supported the new position, while Lovestone remained non-committal and Sam Darcy of the Young Communist League was the only white to oppose it. At the Congress sessions, Ford and Hall, under the name of Jones, each spoke twice on the American Negro question, once on the discussion of Bukharin's opening report and again in the discussion of Kuusinen's report, The Revolutionary Movements in the Colonies. All 4 speeches are given below, in succession, and somewhat condensed. Taken together, these 4 speeches present a devastating criticism of the American Party for its neglect of Negro work and for white chauvinism in its ranks. Ford held that more than in any other field, Negro work was hampered by the factional struggle, by the racism of both factions. He revealed that no more than 50 Negroes were in the Workers' Communist Party, though it claimed 12,000 dues-paying members as of February 1928, the Communist International between the 5th and 6th World Congress, London, July 1928, page 351. He also reported that no action whatsoever, not even discussion, had taken place on the 19 communications from the Executive Committee of the C to the American Party on the Negro question that he had been able to locate in the files of its Secretariat. Hull charged there was more white chauvinism in the American Party than in any other Communist Party. In opposing the national self-determination position, Ford held that because of the class differentiation among the Negroes there cannot be a common national ideology of the oppressed proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Any nationalist movement on the part of the Negroes, he said, does nothing but play into the hands of the bourgeoisie by arresting the revolutionary class movement of the Negro masses and further widening a gulf between the white and similar oppressed groups. Hull held, there exists no national entity as such among the American Negro, that the Negro desires to be considered as part of the American nation, and that there are no tendencies toward a separate national minority. The struggle must develop around the slogan of full equality, he held. In his second speech, Ford also noted the use of blacks in World War I by the imperialist powers and their plans to employ them even more widely in the next war. He urged a policy of turning the guns of these troops against their oppressors. Comrade Ford, America, comrades. The American delegation in general is in full agreement with the general line laid down by Comrade Bukharin in his report. There are, however, 2 points which I should like to take up in connection with the report. First, to my mind, Comrade Bukharin's report did not sufficiently touch on the colonial question as it relates to Africa under British, French and yes, American imperialism. He did not sufficiently touch on the colonial question in reference to the West Indies and Haiti, etc. under British and American imperialism. Secondly, Comrade Bukharin's report did not give sufficient attention to the inter-party struggle that exists within the American Party and its effect upon the activity of the party in trade union work, on the question of the organization of the unorganized, and the question of the Negro work. The inter-party struggle has hampered more than any other section of our work, the Negro work. At the present time we have over 2 million Negro industrial proletariat in the American basic industries of the North and East. We also have 1,500,000 agricultural Negro workers in America. Over 1 million Negro domestic workers. 66% of the Negro population of America is confined to the rural and farm districts of the South. Now, comrades, in view of this tremendous revolutionary force, this industrial proletariat, this force of agricultural and rural workers among the Negroes of America, we have no more than 50 Negroes in our party, out of the 12 million Negroes in America. We have not organized a single union in America among the Negro workers. We have had recently in America, the formation by a socialist, of a reactionary trade union among the Negroes, L. This organization has been going on for 2 years and our party has not one iota of influence in this organization because of a definite underestimation of Negro work in general. Negro comrades have been driven out of the trade union movement, without the party raising a hand or doing anything to counteract this situation. Negro comrades who are continually bringing this question before the party are persecuted and driven out of the party and into the IWW and other organizations. At the last conference of the miners in Pittsburgh on April LST2, one of the most active Negro comrades we have in the miners field, because he violated discipline in bringing before the conference the question of Negro work, has been persecuted and even accused of being a spy of the reactionary forces of America, and these charges have not been substantiated by facts and evidence. Comrades, more than this, there has been evidence of white chauvinism even in the ranks of the party. During the convening of important conferences or congresses such as we have here, or such as the RILU Congress, our party always makes an effort to intensify its activity in Negro work. During the month of April, to give a small example, there appeared in the columns of the Daily Worker the amazing spectacle of 1,100 lines of written material concerning Negro workers of America. By investigating the archives of the Comintern, we have discovered that during the last few years no less than 19 resolutions and documents upon the Negro question have been sent by the Comintern to the American Party, and not a single one of them has been carried into effect or brought before the party. I say that the few Negro comrades we have in the party have been making a fight for years to bring this question before our party, and now we bring it before a Comintern Congress. There are still millions of Negro workers in Africa, in East Africa and the Gold Coast, etc. In the West Indies and Haiti there are rumblings of revolt against British and American imperialism. In general, I think it is necessary for Comrade Bucharin to stress the need for activity in these territories, and where Negro workers generally live. I think the delegates of all the parties concerned, the British, French and American, should meet at the Congress in a special commission for the discussion of work among the Negro workers in these colonies. In conclusion, the inherent contradictions of capitalism are leading the imperialist countries further and further into colonial spheres and fields. The next great revolutionary wave will come from the Negro workers and the exploited workers and peasants of the colonies in which Negro workers live. Under the banner of the Comintern, the Negro workers will be found fighting for the overthrow of capitalism and the downfall of imperialism through the world. International Press Correspondence, August 3, 1928, pp. 7772-7773. 1. The reference is to the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, formed in 1925 with Socialist A. Philip Randolph as general organizer. 2. The reference is to the Save the Union Conference, led by the Tool. See below. Comrade Jones, Otto Hall, USA. It is stated as an excuse that the drawing of a greater amount of Negro workers into the industries during and since the imperialist war has intensified the economic rivalry between black and white workers. This is basically true, but that does not justify the opinion of the upper stratum of the organized white trade unionists that the Negro is a potential strikebreaker, which is reflected in the attitude of some elements of our party, particularly in the TUEL. One of the main reasons that this atmosphere exists is that we have not carried on a consistent and energetic fight against chauvinism in the past, and it is only recently that we see the beginnings of a determined effort to deal with race prejudice. It would be untrue to say that the party has made no efforts to organize Negroes, that we have done nothing at all. We have made efforts. That we have not been successful so far is due to mistakes and lack of a definite policy. The Negro Labor Congress marks an effort, but it was not successful owing to insufficient preparation and poor direction, but it marks an attempt. There has been an effort to draw more Negroes into the general party work, and this effort must be intensified. Attempts have been made to organize the Negroes into the various unions. Some work has been done among the Negroes in the Passaic strike and also among the Negro miners, but all this is not enough, and we should intensify our efforts in this direction. In the recent election campaign and convention, there were 25 Negro delegates out of 250 who actively participated in all the committees. Our election platform was very clear on the Negro question, but what we have to do is to carry out what we have written. Recently we have made attempts to penetrate the South. This is a very important thing and must be carried on to the best and fullest of our ability. There have been many mistakes in our work, and this is due to the lack of close cooperation of the party as a whole with the work of the Negro comrades. The point raised by Comrade Bucharin concerning the necessity of raising the technical level of the party can be applied very effectively to our party. We must carry on an ideological campaign among the membership of our party as a whole, from the top to the bottom. Now a few words on the inter-party situation. I know that right mistakes have been made by our party leadership, but to say that the general policy of this leadership is a right-wing policy is, in my opinion, incorrect. Furthermore, to make a factional issue of these mistakes is not the way to correct them. The mistakes in regard to Negro work have been made by the party as a whole and not by any particular group. I am in full agreement with the comrade who says that drastic measures should be taken against any attempts to revive factionalism in our party. This comrade says that the Negro work in our party has been made a factional football. I say that our party as a whole has neglected this work. If the minority group has stood out sharply on a point wherein the Negro question was involved, the records ought to show it. If they have not done this, then they are equally guilty. Now as to the comrade who was mentioned here as one who should have come over here with the delegation. I refer to Comrade Moore. If it is true that this comrade has been guilty of any anti-party activities, he should be corrected. I say that we should bring this comrade here to Moscow because he is the official leader of the American Negro Labor Congress, and I believe he can be saved for the party. Some comrades in our party attempt to make an issue of the fact that they, more than the others, are willing to admit mistakes which they made in the past. An admission of mistakes is good for Seoul, in Moscow. But we are not impressed with what is admitted here but what is carried out when these same comrades are back in the United States. We should recognize the potential revolutionary possibilities of the Negroes and that they can be utilized in the fight against American imperialism. Our duty is to organize this mass. Only then will we be able to shake the foundations of American imperialism. International Press Correspondence, August 8, 1928, pp. 811-812. Comrade Ford, Negro comrade from the USA, in name of the Communist fraction of the RILU. Comrades, permit me to speak first on the attitude of the Socialist Party, the two international, to Negro and colonial peoples in general. Secondly, on some theoretical points in connection with the Negro question in America. And thirdly, on some practical steps towards carrying out our general program. First, A protest was recently made by colonial guests at the Congress of the Two International at Brussels, the essence of which characterizes the attitude of the Two International to oppressed peoples in general, and also to the Negro peoples in particular. This protest reads as follows. Having examined the decisions of the Colonial Commission of the Socialist Labor International, we have arrived at the conclusion that these decisions, in their present form, are inconsistent with the equality of nations and with the principle of self-determination and equality of peoples which should be applied to all oppressed nations and subject races without any distinction whatever. This protest brings out the basic principles of the Two International with regard to the oppressed peoples, and particularly to Negro peoples, which is characterized by the following quotation. This point of view is held by such renegades as Kautsky, who maintains that the whole racial question amounts exclusively to the class struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and that there is no need for any struggle for the social equality of the oppressed races, and that such a struggle is even harmful since it interferes with the fundamental struggle. Let the Negroes wait until the advent of socialism, then the emancipated proletariat will proceed to emancipate all the oppressed peoples including the Negro race in America. Let me now examine the attitude of the Two International in regard to the Negroes in America. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a progressive labor league made up of Negro workers recently called a conference to participate in the elections in Milwaukee. This conference, which included fraternal organizations, working class organizations, sent also an invitation to the Socialist Party of Milwaukee. The Socialist Party refused to participate in this conference upon the ground that the movement was essentially a race movement and not a working class movement. In an article appearing in the Ford, an organ of the Socialist Party of America, Mr. Bruce, in analyzing the Negro situation in America, states the following. But it is true as the years pass, as more and more Negroes come to the North and become decent, self-respecting men and women, doing their work, exercising their citizenship like their fellow Americans, the Negro problem will tend more and more to be solved. Second, there is a considerable discussion going on in the Negro Commission regarding the slogan for a republic of the Negro peoples in America. The Congress must give this question very serious attention. In the United States we find no economic system separating the two races. The interests of the Negro and white workers are the same. The Negro peasant and the white peasant interests are the same. But the bourgeoisie has set up a racial barrier, playing upon the differences of color, of skin and so forth, in order to super-exploit the colored workers, which has its effect, to a great extent, upon the white workers. It seems that any nationalist movement on the part of the Negroes does nothing but play into the hands of the bourgeoisie by arresting the revolutionary class movement of the Negro masses and further widening the gulf between the white and similar oppressed groups. The revolutionary movement of the Negroes can take three forms. 1. The Negro movement may manifest itself as a reformist movement of the opportunistic, conciliatory upper strata of the Negro bourgeoisie. 2. The chauvinistic racial movement of those elements of the black bourgeoisie who are interested in the isolation of the Negro population in order to secure for themselves the unhindered exploitation of Negro labor. 3. The racial movement of the Negroes can be a movement of the Negro workers and urban poor of the North, who are considerably more exploited than the white workers, and also of the Negro agricultural laborers and Negro peasants of the South who are exploited by capitalist landlords. They are struggling for equal conditions of labor with the white brothers of their class for full political and social equality between white and Negro workers. The class struggle is an attack upon imperialist super profits. The racial movement is therefore a revolutionary anti-imperialist struggle, a struggle insolubly tied up with the revolutionary struggle of the poor peasantry and workers against capitalist exploitation. This question is related to the general question of the Negroes throughout the world. In South Africa we have the question of whether we can lead the peasant revolution. In Haiti there is national aspiration. This question of nationalism needs the full attention of the Comintern in order that we can lay down a thorough theoretical basis for our future work in regard to the oppressed peoples and the Negro peoples in general. Finally, we come to the third point, and that is in reference to our practical program in connection with our Negro work and our colonial work. I want to touch upon some aspects of the Negro question in regard to the approaching World War. In the last war 2,290,000 Negroes were registered for military service by the United States, of whom 458,000 were examined for military service in the United States Army. Of this number 200,000 served in France. At the present time the United States, in her feverish preparation for war, is not overlooking the Negro as a combatant troop as well as non-combatant soldiers. 2 regiments of state militia have been federalized into the regular army and are being constantly trained. The National Defense Act of 1920 provided for the organization of the military guards to train Negroes in peace times. This organization is similar to the Minutemen, provided for by the same act, an anti-labor organization headed by General Dawes. Under the pressure of petty bourgeois intellectual Negroes, Negro students are being sent to West Point, the military academy of the United States Army. France controls a colonial population of 60 million colonials in Africa. 845,000 colonials served in France in the last war. 535,000 were soldiers and 311,000 were in labor contingents. The peace footing of the French army at the present time is 660,000, of whom 189,000 are colonial troops. In 10 years' time, estimated from 1924, France plans to have 400,000 trained colonial troops and 450,000 more, ready to be trained. England did not have as many colonial troops in the last war as France, but the troops of West Africa conquered West Africa for England and held the Turks in check. At the present time, England offers her greatest object lesson in the field of black labor. Anglo-American rivalry throws up the possibility of black troops of these two nations being thrown against each other in the defense of their country. But more than this, it is not unlikely that in the event of the next war the scene of battle will shift to different parts of the world and even center in Africa. There is another grouping, the imperialist world against the USSR. In this alignment the imperialists intend to use, if possible, the Negro colonial troops as was done during the Civil War in Russia in 1920, 21 and 22, in which France and England used black troops against the Red Army. We must turn our faces to the colonies and prepare the colonial troops to turn their guns upon their oppressor, to fight for their liberation from imperialist exploitation and oppression. The various parties, the French, British, American, Belgian, South African, should now begin plans to turn the resentment of the Negro troops against their oppressors. Now, in regard to our practical work, we must begin to organize trade unions among the Negro peoples of the world. There has been set up at the Professor Intern and International Labor Bureau of Negro Workers for the purpose of unifying the Negro workers and the white workers throughout the world. Where possible, to organize trade unions of white and colored workers and to organize colored unions separately where this is not possible. The Bureau will also issue bulletins, pamphlets and literature with the idea of centralizing and consolidating and bringing together the proletariat of the whole world, against the imperialist oppression and against a world war against the USSR. International Press Correspondence, October 25, 1928, pp. 1345-1349. The last section of the speech dealing with Negro troops was published separately as an article, with some variations, in International Press Correspondence, August 31, 1928. Comrade Jones, Otto Hull, USA. Comrades, the draft theses on the colonial question are by far the most thorough theses in point of detail that we have had up to now on the question. We see from the discussion so far that there is a considerable amount of disagreement with some of the points in the theses, particularly on India and China. From the point of view of revolutionary activity at present, China and India are the most important colonies to be considered, but we must not overlook the world significance of the Negro question, which in the past has not been given sufficient attention by the Comintern. At the 4th and 5th Congresses of the Comintern, there was some discussion on the necessity of the creation of a Western Colonial Bureau, dealing with the Negro question. It seems that as far as actual work is concerned, the Bureau has done very little, and nobody knows what became of this Bureau afterwards. We also find in the archives much dusty material on this question that has never been read by anybody. We organized here at the Congress a small subcommittee of the Anglo-American Secretariat which dealt with the Negro question in America. This commission has done a considerable amount of work, which of course is by no means complete, but the first steps were made for a real investigation of this question. In this commission there arose some sharp differences as to the character of the Negro movement in the United States. One point of view is that these Negroes are a racial minority but are developing some characteristics of a national minority and that in the future they will have to be considered as a national minority. The other point of view is that these Negroes are a racial minority and are not developing any characteristics of a national minority and that the basis that would develop these characteristics is rapidly disappearing, that there exists no national entity as such among the American Negroes. We have a sharp differentiation in classes among the American Negroes, particularly after the World War, and this class differentiation tends to prevent a development of any national characteristics as such. We find the Negro bourgeoisie are becoming more and more an integral part of the whole of the American bourgeoisie and tilde are completely separated as far as class interests are concerned from the majority of the Negro toilers. The historical development of the American Negro has tended to create in him the desire to be considered a part of the American nation. There are no tendencies to become a separate national minority within the American nation. I have material on this which will be submitted to the Colonial Commission, in support of our disagreement, together with the theses drawn up by the Negro Commission. This is a very important question and deserves careful study before any definite steps are taken in drawing up a program for advancing slogans for our work among the American Negroes. Some comrades consider it necessary at this moment to launch the slogan of self-determination for the American Negroes, to advocate an independent Soviet Socialist Republic in America for Negroes. There is no objection on our part on the principle of a Soviet Republic for Negroes in America. The point we are concerned with here is how to organize these Negroes at present, on the basis of their everyday needs, for the revolution. The question before the Negroes today is not what will be done with them after the revolution, but what measures are we going to take to alleviate their present condition in America. We have to adopt a program that will take care of their immediate needs, of course keeping in mind the necessity for organizing the revolution. A comrade remarked that it was necessary for us to establish a new line of work among the Negroes, to adopt a new program. It is not so much the question of a new program but of carrying out the program that was adopted by the IV and V Congresses on this question. Up till now nothing has been done. The central slogan around which we can rally the Negro masses is the slogan of social equality. And the reason why we have not organized the Negroes in America and why we have such a small number of Negroes in our party is because we have not fought consistently for this principle. And this is due to the fact that we have white chauvinism in our party. Therefore, before we should attempt to launch a slogan of self-determination for the American Negroes as a central slogan, we should give more study to this question. A bureau should be set up in the Comintern dealing specifically with the Negro problem to analyze and study the objective situation in the various countries where there are Negroes and from this study formulate our program. International Press Correspondence, October 30, 1928, pp. 1392-1393. Comrade Katayama, Japan. A number of other speakers touched on the American Negro question in the discussion of Kusinen's report on the revolutionary movement in the colonies. Manuel Gomez, of the American delegation, for example, urged joining the struggles of the Negro as an oppressed minority in the United States with the anti-imperialist struggles in Haiti, San Domingo, etc., including propaganda for self-determination of the Negro. Protocol des 6. Weltcongresses der Kommunistische Internationale, Hamburg, Volume 3, page 161. Greater attention was devoted to the problem of Sen Katayama of the Japanese delegation. He had spent many years in the United States as a worker, had attended Fisk University, had befriended Claude McKay in New York at the Fourth Congress, and was close to the American black students in Moscow. The relations between the mother country and its colonies are very unsatisfactory. Comrade Lenin very strongly emphasized the necessity for the mother country giving every assistance to the revolutionary movement in its colonial countries. I can point to the criminal neglect of the British Party with regard to Ireland and India in the past, and of the Dutch and American parties with regard to the Philippines and Indonesia. The mother countries must correct this inactivity on their part, and give every assistance to the revolutionary movement in these colonial countries. As ably presented for the first time at the Congress, the Negro problems should be seriously considered in a policy decided upon for the immediate future. The Negro question was fully discussed at the two Congress by Comrade Lenin and the American delegates, and certain principles were laid down for this work, as the two Congress considered the Negro question to be of great importance. Comrade Lenin considered the American Negroes as a subject nation, placing them in the same category as Ireland. At this two Congress, the American Party was instructed to investigate the possibility of calling a Negro Congress, first in America, and then a World Negro Congress. The criminal neglect of the Negroes on the part of the American Party, as already pointed out by the Negro representatives, is solely due to the fractional struggles in the American Party. The American Party has never utilized these revolutionary factors for the advancement of the revolutionary movement. This was particularly marked when the anti-lynch bill was before the Congress, which gave immeasurable possibilities for gaining national sympathy for the Negro race. The American Party failed to utilize the occasion of the passing of this bill for revolutionary propaganda in the country. This bill passed the House, in spite of the solid opposition from the South, but the Senate shelved the question, where it is still lying. The party should take up this bill and utilize it for energetic propaganda against the white oppression and persecution of the Negroes. Comrades, I spent 26 years in America as a worker and was connected with the American movement. I have therefore a right to regard the American Party as mine. Unless the American comrades liquidate their factional struggles, the American Party will not develop into a mass party. You cannot say that you are really exerting your influence to get the Negroes into the party. Of course, you have to overcome the social prejudices and impediments to conduct party work among the Negroes, but it is your duty to carry out the instructions of the Comintern. Increase the Negro membership in the party, and let them solve their own problems by themselves under the guidance of the party. International Press Correspondence, August 13, 1928, pp. 856-857. Abridged. The Communist International Resolution on the Negro Question in the U.S. The resolution on the Negro question in the United States, given below in full, was issued in its final form by the Political Secretariat of the Communist International and was dated October 26, 1928, almost 2 months after the end of the Sixth World Congress. This would seem to indicate that the draft resolution submitted to the Congress by the Negro Commission went through considerable revision to take account of the discussion at the Congress. In any case, the resolution provided the guiding policy which the Communist Party of the United States was expected to accept. There is available no published record or account of discussions in the American Party on the resolution at the time it was transmitted. The discussions that took place occurred with the participation of delegates and leaders of the American Party, white and black, in the Communist International before and during the Congress as well as afterwards in the Secretariat. The resolution was published in the United States first in the Daily Worker of February 12, 1929, and almost a year later in the January 1930 issue of the Communist, theoretical organ of the party, giving it full status as an official statement of policy. In fact, little evidence could be found that the substance of the resolution was discussed in the party or in its journals throughout the year 1929. The apparent paucity of discussion, at least in print, and the long delay in publishing the resolution in the Communist may be attributed to the sharpened factional struggle which reached a climax in 1929, as well as opposition to the new line among leading American black communists or reluctance to accept it fully, and to mere indifference to the question among others. The core of the resolution is the concept of the American Negro as an oppressed nation or national minority entitled to the right of self-determination. Derived from that concept is the distinction between the oppressor nation and the oppressed people, the racism of the former and the distrust of the oppressor people by the latter, with the prime task of communists to fight racism if black distrust is to be overcome. Much of the rest summarized, in the light of the new position, what had previously been stated in party programs. The new Negro proletariat is an important sector of the American working class as a whole and as leader of the black liberation movement, the Communist Party as champion of Negro liberation and leader in the struggle for equality, the potential leading role of the American black proletariat in the global struggle of Negro peoples against imperialism, the fight against the color bar in the trade unions, together with a sharp attack upon the trade union Unity League for its complete neglect of work among Negroes, etc. Worth noting is the emphasis upon work in the South, the need to build a Negro cadre, and the special lot of Negro women. Strongly stressed are the fight against white chauvinism in the American Party itself and the need for a courageous campaign of self-criticism in this respect. The American Negro Labor Congress is seen as existing only nominally, and its broadening is urged, although there is to be found here also a negative approach to the church and the treacherous Negro middle class. Of special importance is the distinction made between the struggle for equal rights and the propaganda for the slogan of self-determination, a crucial point later to be overlooked. While the resolution as a whole signified a vital turning point in party policy that was to produce significant advances in its Negro work, it still left much to be clarified about the novel program of black self-determination. The emphasis placed upon the American Negro question at the Sixth Congress was rather widely noted in the Negro press here. Thus, the Pittsburgh Courier, among the more conservative of the black journals, remarked editorially, November 10, 1928, upon this fact and asserted that the American Negro was not going to embrace communism for he realized that his position is precarious enough without making it more so by joining a crew that espouses the overthrow of the government and the dictatorship of the proletariat. It then offered some advice. Let the communists waste no more time and money on winning over the black American workers but rather concentrate on the white workers. When they have made the white workers internationally minded and devoid of race chauvinism, it will then be time for them to cherish some hope of success in propagandizing the black Americans. It would not be long before the influx of blacks into the Communist Party would lead to another tune. 1. The industrialization of the South, the concentration of a new Negro working class population in the big cities of the East and North and the entrance of the Negroes into the basic industries on a mass scale, create the possibility for the Negro workers, under the leadership of the Communist Party, to assume the hegemony of all Negro liberation movements, and to increase their importance and role in the revolutionary struggle of the American proletariat. The Negro working class has reached a stage of development which enables it, if properly organized and well led, to fulfill successfully its double historical mission. A. To play a considerable role in the class struggle against American imperialism as an important part of the American working class, and B. To lead the movement of the oppressed masses of the Negro population. 2. The bulk of the Negro population, 86%, live in the southern states. Of this number 74% live in the rural districts and are dependent almost exclusively upon agriculture for a livelihood. Approximately one-half of these rural dwellers live in the so-called Black Belt, in which area they constitute more than 50% of the entire population. The great mass of the Negro agrarian population are subject to the most ruthless exploitation and persecution of a semi-slave character. In addition to the ordinary forms of capitalist exploitation, American imperialism utilizes every possible form of slave exploitation, peonage, sharecropping, landlord supervision of crops and marketing, etc., for the purpose of extracting super profits. On the basis of these slave remnants, there has grown up a superstructure of social and political inequality that expresses itself in lynching, segregation, Jim Crowism, etc. Necessary condition for National Revolutionary Movement 3. The various forms of oppression of the Negro masses, who are concentrated mainly in the so-called Black Belt, provide the necessary conditions for a national revolutionary movement among the Negroes. The Negro agricultural laborers and the tenant farmers feel the pressure of white persecution and exploitation. Thus, the agrarian problem lies at the root of the Negro national movement. The great majority of Negroes in the rural districts of the South are not reserves of capitalist reaction, but potential allies of the revolutionary proletariat. Their objective position facilitates their transformation into a revolutionary force, which, under the leadership of the proletariat, will be able to participate in the joint struggle with all other workers against capitalist exploitation. 4. It is the duty of the Negro workers to organize through the mobilization of the broad masses of the Negro population the struggle of the agricultural laborers and tenant farmers against all forms of semi-feudal oppression. On the other hand, it is the duty of the Communist Party of the USA to mobilize and rally the broad masses of the white workers for active participation in this struggle. For that reason, the party must consider the beginning of systematic work in the South as one of its main tasks, having regard for the fact that the bringing together of the workers and toiling masses of all nationalities for a joint struggle against the landowners and the bourgeoisie is one of the most important aims of the Communist International, as laid down in the resolutions on the national and colonial question of the Second and Sixth Congresses of the Comintern. For complete emancipation of oppressed Negro race. 5. To accomplish this task, the Communist Party must come out as the champion of the right of the oppressed Negro race for full emancipation. While continuing and intensifying the struggle under the slogan of full social and political equality for the Negroes, which must remain the central slogan of our Party for Work among the masses, the party must come out openly and unreservedly for the right of Negroes to national self-one for a study of the location of Negro population, the Black Belt and its agrarian structure as they developed from 1860 to 1930. C. James S. Allen, The Negro Question in the United States, International Publishers, 1936. 2. This was a phrase used by J. Lovestone to describe the role of the black peasantry. Determination in the southern states where the Negroes form a majority of the population. The struggle for equal rights and the propaganda for the slogan of self-determination must be linked up with the economic demands of the Negro masses, especially those directed against the slave remnants and all forms of national and racial oppression. Special stress must be laid upon organizing active resistance against lynching, Jim Crowism, segregation and all other forms of oppression of the Negro population. 6. All forms of work among the Negroes, as well as the struggle for the Negro cause among the whites, must be used, based upon the changes which have taken place in the relationship of classes among the Negro population. The existence of a Negro industrial proletariat of almost 2 million workers makes it imperative that the main emphasis should be placed on these new proletarian forces. The Negro workers must be organized under the leadership of the Communist Party, and thrown into joint struggle together with the white workers. The party must learn to combine all demands of the Negroes with the economic and political struggle of the workers and the poor farmers. American Negro Question, part of World Problem 7. The Negro question in the United States must be treated in its relation to the Negro questions and struggles in other parts of the world. The Negro race everywhere is an oppressed race. Whether it is a minority, USA, etc., majority, South Africa, or inhabits a so-called independent state, Liberia, etc., the Negroes are oppressed by imperialism. Thus, a common tie of interest is established for the revolutionary struggle of race and national liberation from imperialist domination of the Negroes in various parts of the world. A strong Negro revolutionary movement in the USA will be able to influence and direct the revolutionary movement in all those parts of the world where the Negroes are oppressed by imperialism. 8. The proletarianization of the Negro masses makes the trade unions the principal form of mass organization. It is the primary task of the party to play an active part and lead in the work of organizing the Negro workers and agricultural laborers in trade unions. Owing to the refusal of the majority of the white unions in the USA, led by the reactionary leaders, to admit Negroes to membership, steps must be immediately taken to set up special unions for those Negro workers who are not allowed to join the white unions. At the same time, however, the struggles for the inclusion of Negro workers in the existing unions must be intensified and concentrated upon. Special attention must be given to those unions in which the statutes and rules set up special limitations against the admission of Negro workers. The primary duty of the Communist Party in this connection is to wage a merciless struggle against the AFL bureaucracy, which prevents the Negro workers from joining the white workers' unions. The organization of special trade unions for the Negro masses must be carried out as part and parcel of the struggle against the restrictions imposed upon the Negro workers and for their admission to the white workers' unions. The creation of separate Negro unions should in no way weaken the struggle in the old unions for the admission of Negroes on equal terms. Every effort must be made to see that all new unions organized by the left wing and by the Communist Party should embrace the workers of all nationalities and of all races. The principle of one union for all workers in each industry, white and black, should cease to be a mere slogan of propaganda, and must become a slogan of action. Party trade union work among Negroes. 9. While organizing the Negroes into unions and conducting an aggressive struggle against the anti-Negro trade union policy of the AFL, the party must pay more attention than it has hitherto done to the work in the Negro workers' organizations, such as the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, Chicago Asphalt Workers' Union, and so on. The existence of 2 million Negro workers and the further industrialization of the Negroes demand a radical change in the work of the party among the Negroes. The creation of working-class organizations and the extension of our influence in the existing working-class Negro organizations are of much greater importance than the work in bourgeois and petty bourgeois organizations, such as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Pan-African Congress, etc. 10. The American Negro Labor Congress continues to exist only nominally. Every effort should be made to strengthen this organization as a medium through which we can extend the work of the party among the Negro masses and mobilize the Negro workers under our leadership. After careful preparatory work, which must be started at once, another convention of the American Negro Labor Congress should be held. A concrete plan must also be presented to the Congress for an intensified struggle for the economic, social, political and national demands of the Negro masses. The program of the American Negro Labor Congress must deal specially with the agrarian demands of the Negro farmers and tenants in the South. 11. The importance of trade union work imposes special tasks upon the Trade Union Unity League. The TUUL has completely neglected the work among the Negro workers, notwithstanding the fact that these workers are objectively in a position to play a very great part in carrying through the program of organizing the unorganized. The closest contact must be established between the TUUL and the Negro masses. The TUUL must become the CH-M pion in the struggle for the rights of the Negroes in the old unions, and in the organizing of new unions for Negroes and whites, as well as separate Negro unions. White chauvinism evidenced in the American Party. 12. The Central Executive Committee of the American Communist Party itself stated in its resolution of April 30, 1928, that the party as a whole has not sufficiently realized the significance of work among the Negroes. Such an attitude toward party work among the Negroes is, however, not satisfactory. The time is ripe to begin within the party a courageous campaign of self-criticism concerning the work among the Negroes. Penetrating self-criticism is the necessary preliminary condition for directing the Negro work along new lines. 13. The party must bear in mind that white chauvinism, which is the expression of the ideological influence of American imperialism among the workers, not only prevails among different strata of the white workers in the USA, but is even reflected in various forms in the party itself. White chauvinism has manifested itself even in open antagonism of some comrades to the Negro comrades. In some instances where communists were called upon to champion and to lead in the most vigorous manner the fight against white chauvinism, they, instead, yielded to it. In Gary, white members of the Workers' Party protested against Negroes eating in the restaurant controlled by the party. In Detroit, party members, yielding to pressure, drove out Negro comrades from a social given in aid of the miners' strike. While the party has taken certain measures against these manifestations of white chauvinism, nevertheless those manifestations must be regarded as indications of race prejudice even in the ranks of the party, which must be fought with the utmost energy. 14. An aggressive fight against all forms of white chauvinism must be accompanied by a widespread and thorough educational campaign in the spirit of internationalism within the party, utilizing for this purpose to the fullest possible extent the party schools, the party press and the public platform, to stamp out all forms of antagonism, or even indifference among our white comrades toward the Negro work. This educational work should be conducted simultaneously with a campaign to draw the white workers and the poor farmers into the struggle for the support of the demands of the Negro workers. Tasks of party in relation to Negro work. 15. The Communist Party of the USA, in its treatment of the Negro question, must all the time bear in mind this twofold task. A. To fight for the full rights of the oppressed Negroes and for their right to self-determination and against all forms of chauvinism, especially among the workers of the oppressing nationality. B. the propaganda and the day-to-day practice of international class solidarity must be considered as one of the basic tasks of the American Communist Party. The fight, by propaganda and by deeds, should be directed first and foremost against the chauvinism of the workers of the oppressing nationality as well as against bourgeois segregation tendencies of the oppressed nationality. The propaganda of international class solidarity is the necessary prerequisite for the unity of the working class in the struggle. In the international education of the workers of the oppressor countries, emphasis must necessarily be laid on their advocating freedom for the oppressed countries to secede and their fighting for it. It is our right and duty to treat every social democrat of an oppressor nation who fails to conduct such propaganda as a scoundrel and an imperialist. Lenin, Selected Articles on the National Question. 316. The party must seriously take up the task of training a cadre of Negro comrades as leaders, bringing them into the party schools in the USA and abroad, and make every effort to draw Negro proletarians into active and leading work in the party, not confining the activities of the Negro comrades exclusively to the work among Negroes. Simultaneously, white workers must specially be trained for work among the Negroes. 17. Efforts must be made to transform the Negro Champion into a weekly mass organ of the Negro proletariat and tenant farmers. Every encouragement and inducement must be given to the Negro comrades to utilize the Negro press generally. Negro work part of general work of Party 18. The party must link up the struggle on behalf of the Negroes with the general campaigns of the party. The Negro problem must be part and parcel of all and every campaign. 3 volts. I. Lenin, the discussion on self-determination summed up in National Liberation, Socialism and Imperialism. Selected Writings, International Publishers, New York, 1968, page 157. Conducted by the party. In the election campaigns, trade union work, the campaigns for the organization of the unorganized, anti-imperialist work, Labor Party campaign, international labor, defense, etc., the Central Executive Committee must work out plans designed to draw the Negroes into active participation in all these campaigns, and at the same time to bring the white workers into the struggle on behalf of the Negroes' demands. It must be borne in mind that the Negro masses will not be won for the revolutionary struggles until such time as the most conscious section of the white workers show, by action, that they are fighting with the Negroes against all racial discrimination and persecution. Every member of the party must bear in mind that the age-old oppression of colonial and weak nationalities by the imperialist powers has not only filled the working masses of the oppressed countries with animosity towards the oppressor nations but has also aroused distrust in these nations in general, even in their proletariat. See Draft. Theses on Colonial and National Question of Second Congress, 419. The Negro women in industry and on the farms constitute a powerful potential force in the struggle for Negro emancipation. By reason of being unorganized to an even greater extent than male Negro workers, they are the most exploited section. The AFL bureaucracy naturally exercises toward them a double hostility, by reason of both their color and sex. It therefore becomes an important task of the party to bring the Negro women into the economic and political struggle. 20. Only by an active and strenuous fight on the part of the white workers against all forms of oppression directed against the Negroes, will the party be able to draw into its ranks the most active and conscious Negro workers, men and women, and to increase its influence in those intermediary organizations which are necessary for the mobilization of the Negro masses in the struggle against segregation, lynching, Jim Crowism, etc. 21. In the present struggle in the mining industry, the Negro workers participate actively and in large numbers. The leading role the party played in this struggle has helped greatly to increase its prestige. Nevertheless, the special efforts being made by the party in the work among the Negro strikers cannot be considered as adequate. The party did not send enough Negro organizers into the coalfields, and it did not sufficiently attempt, in the first stages of the fight, to develop the most able Negro strikers and to place them in leading positions. The party must be especially criticized for its failure to put Negro workers on the presidium of the Pittsburgh Miners' Conference, 5 doing so only after such representation was demanded by the Negroes themselves. 22. In the work among the Negroes, special attention should be paid to the role played by the churches and preachers who are acting on behalf of American imperialism. The party must conduct a continuous and carefully worked-out campaign among the Negro masses, sharpened primarily against the preachers and the churchmen, who are the agents of the oppressors of the Negro race. Party work among Negro proletariat and peasantry. 23. The party must apply united front tactics for specific demands to the existing Negro petty bourgeois organizations. The 4INV. I. Lenin, Selected Works, Volume 3, page 427. Purpose of these united front tactics should be the mobilizing of the Negro masses under the leadership of the party, and to expose the treacherous petty bourgeois leadership of those organizations. 24. The Negro Miners Relief Committee in the Harlem Tenants' League are examples of joint organizations of action which may serve as a means of drawing the Negro masses into struggle. In every case, the utmost effort must be made to combine the struggle of the Negro workers with the struggle of the white workers, and to draw the white workers' organizations into such joint campaigns. 25. In order to reach the bulk of the Negro masses, special attention should be paid to the work among the Negroes in the South. For that purpose, the party should establish a district organization in the most suitable locality in the South. Whilst continuing trade union work among the Negro workers and the agricultural laborers, special organizations of tenant farmers must be set up. Special efforts must also be made to secure the support of the sharecroppers in the creation of such organizations. The party must undertake the task of working out a definite program of immediate demands, directed against all slave remnants, which will serve as the rallying slogans for the formation of such peasant organizations. 26. Henceforth the Communist Party must consider the struggle on behalf of the Negro masses, the task of organizing the Negro workers and peasants and the drawing of these oppressed masses into the proletarian revolutionary struggle, as one of its major tasks, remembering, in the words of the Second Congress resolution, that complete victory over capitalism cannot be won unless the proletariat and, following it, the mass of working people in all countries and nations of the world voluntarily strive for elegance and unity. 11.6. Political Secretariat, 7 Communist International, Moscow, USSR. October 26, 1928. Theses and resolutions adopted by the 6th World Congress. The position on the Negro question as approved by the 6th Congress was included in the following summary of the resolutions of the Congress. It is of interest that the Negro question in the United States is placed here in the context of the world condition of Negro peoples, as in South America, South Africa, Negro states such as Liberia and Haiti, and the colonies of Central Africa. 5. The reference is to the Save the Union Conference, held in Pittsburgh, April 1, 1928. Some 250,000 bituminous miners had been locked out in the Pennsylvania and Ohio fields. The Save the Union committees had been formed by the tool to fight the no relief, no support policy of the John L. Lewis administration in the United Mine Workers Union. Negro miners were conspicuous at the Pittsburgh Conference. The National Miners Union, affiliated to the tool, was formed later that year. 6. Lenin, Selected Works, Volume 3, page 427. 7. The Secretariat of the Executive Committee of the Communist International became the political secretariat in January 1927. In connection with the colonial question, the 6th Congress drew the special attention of the Communist parties to the Negro question. The position of the Negro varies in different countries, and accordingly requires concrete investigation and analysis. The territories, in which compact Negro masses are to be found, can be divided according to their general features into the following groups. 1. The United States and some South American countries, in which the compact Negro masses constitute a minority in relation to the white population. 2. The Union of South Africa, where the Negroes are the majority in relation to the white colonials. 3. The Negro states, which are actually colonies or semi-colonies of imperialism, Liberia, Haiti, San Domingo. 4. The whole of Central Africa, divided into the colonies and mandated territories of various imperialist powers, Great Britain, France, Portugal, etc. The tasks of the Communist parties have to be defined in their dependence on the concrete situation. In the United States are to be found 12 million Negroes. The majority of them are tenants, paying in kind and living under semi-feudal and semi-slave conditions. The position of these Negro tenant farmers is exactly the same as that of agricultural laborers, being only formally distinguishable from the slavery that the Constitution is supposed to have abolished. The white landowner, uniting in one-person landlord, merchant and usurer, employs the lynching of Negroes, segregation and other methods of American bourgeois democracy reproducing the worst features of exploitation of the slavery period. Owing to the industrialization of the South, a Negro proletariat is coming into existence. At the same time, the emigration of Negroes to the North continues at an ever-increasing rate, where the huge majority of Negroes become unskilled laborers. The growth of the Negro proletariat is the most important phenomenon of recent years. At the same time, there is arising in the Negro quarters, the Negro petty bourgeoisie, from which is derived a stratum of intellectuals and a thin stratum of bourgeoisie, the latter acting as the agent of imperialism. One of the most important tasks of the Communist Party consists in the struggle for a complete and real equality of the Negroes, for the abolition of all kinds of social and political inequalities. It is the duty of the Communist Party to carry on the most energetic struggle against any exhibition of white chauvinism, to organize active resistance to lynching, to strengthen its work among Negro proletarians, to draw into its ranks the most conscious elements of the Negro workers, to fight for the acceptance of Negro workers in all organizations of white workers, and especially in the trade unions, which does not exclude, if necessary, their organization into separate trade unions, to organize the masses of peasants and agricultural workers in the South, to carry on work among the petty bourgeois Negro masses, to enlighten them regarding the utopian, reactionary character of petty bourgeois tendencies such as Garveyism, and to carry on a struggle against the influence of such tendencies in the working class and peasantry. In those regions of the South in which compact Negro masses are living, it is essential to put forward the slogan of the right of self-determination for Negroes. A radical transformation of the agrarian structure of the Southern states is one of the basic tasks of the revolution. Negro communists must explain to Negro workers and peasants that only their close union with the white proletariat and joint struggle with them against the American bourgeoisie can lead to their liberation from barbarous exploitation, and that only the victorious proletarian revolution will completely and permanently solve the agrarian and national question of the Southern United States in the interest of the overwhelming majority of the Negro population of the country. In the Union of South Africa, the Negro masses, which constitute the majority of the population, are being expropriated from the land by the white colonists and by the state, are deprived of political rights and of the right of freedom of movement, are subjected to most brutal forms of racial and class oppression, and suffer simultaneously from pre-capitalist and capitalist methods of exploitation and oppression. The Communist Party, which has already achieved definite successes among the Negro proletariat, has the duty of continuing still more energetically the struggle for complete equality of rights for the Negroes, and for confiscation of the land of the landlords. In drawing into its organization non-Negro workers, organizing them in trade unions, and in carrying on a struggle for the acceptance of Negroes by the trade unions of white workers, the Communist Party has the obligation to struggle by all methods against every racial prejudice in the ranks of the white workers and to eradicate entirely such prejudices from its own ranks. The party ust determinedly and consistently put forward the slogan for the creation of an independent native republic, with simultaneous guarantees for the rights of the white minority, and struggle in deeds for its realization. In proportion as the development of capitalist relationships disintegrates the tribal structure, the party must strengthen its work in the education and class consciousness of the exploited strata of the Negro population, and cooperate in their liberation from the influence of the exploiting tribal strata, which become more and more agents of imperialism. In the Central African colonies of imperialism, colonial exploitation takes on the very worst forms, uniting slave-owning, feudal and capitalist methods of exploitation. In the post-war period, capital from the imperialist metropolitan countries has flowed in an ever-growing stream to the African colonies, compelling the concentration of considerable masses of the expropriated and proletarianized population in plantations, mining and other enterprises. The Congress makes it a duty of Communist parties in the metropolitan countries to put an end to the indifference which they have exhibited in regard to the mass movements in these colonies, and instead to afford energetic support both in the imperialist centers and in the colonies themselves to these movements, at the same time attentively studying the situation in these countries for the purpose of exposing the bloody exploits of imperialism and of the possibility of organizational connections with the developing proletarian elements there which are so mercilessly exploited by imperialism. International Press Correspondence, December 12, 1928. The Communists are for a black republic. One of the few references to the self-determination thesis during the period of discussion preceding the Sixth Convention occurs in this Daily Worker editorial on South Africa and the American South. The whole capitalist press is up in the air. London exposures. Johannesburg exposures. Riga exposures follow each other with dramatic swiftness. The charge is stupendous. Moscow wants to create an independent Negro republic in South Africa. This charge is well-founded. We pled guilty. The Communists do want a native Negro republic in South Africa. The Sixth World Congress of the Communist International took up the Negro question in all its ramifications. The deliberation of the Congress analyzed the situation of the Negroes in the United States of America, in the South African Union, in the Negro states of Liberia, Haiti, Santo Domingo, and in the Negro colonies of Central Africa. The Communist International considers the problems of the oppressed Negro race as one of the most significant questions confronting the Communists. The World Congress, of course, did not confine itself to an analysis of the situation of the Negro masses, but gave clear-cut instructions to the South African Communists how to fight for the oppressed Negroes. The first instruction is for an uncompromising struggle for full equality for the Negroes. The second instruction given by the World Congress of the Communist International to our South African comrades is for a determined fight for the establishment of an independent Negro Republic in South Africa. The slogan of establishment of an independent Negro Republic in South Africa may sound unbelievable to the horror-stricken white capitalists, but certainly it is something natural and self-evident for revolutionary Marxists who accept the fundamental teachings of Lenin about the relation between white imperialism and colonial peoples. Tieleman Roos, Minister of the Government of the Union of South Africa, came out with a vicious attack against the Communists, declaring that in the next election the issue will be nationalism versus communism. He said, "We shall fight to the utmost any attempt to develop natives along lines which will endanger the white standard of the Union." Mr. Tieleman Roos is the embodiment of 100% jingoism, and he is right when he declares that communism endangers the white standard of the Union of South Africa. Communism means the liberation of the Negro masses of South Africa, means the abolishment of a white standard, means the end of the white exploitation and oppression. But to make the end of the white capitalist and plantation rule complete, we can furnish the additional information that the Communist International put forward the slogan of an independent Negro Republic not only for South Africa but for the solid South of the United States of America as well. The Communist is for the slogan of national self-determination for the Negroes in the South, where the Negro toilers live in compact masses, exploited and oppressed by the white plantation owners and capitalists. The Workers' Communist Party of America in the election campaign just passed came out openly and unreservedly for the right of national self-determination for the Negroes. National self-determination means the right to establish their own Negro state, if they choose to do so. The Communist Party declares that it respects the decision of the Negro masses about the form of realization of this self-determination. At the same time, it is the duty of the Negro comrades to emphasize the solidarity of the Negro and white workers and to make clear to the Negro masses that only a victorious proletarian revolution can fully and definitely solve the national question in the solid South in favor of the oppressed Negro masses. The Communist Party is the advocate of full racial, social and political equality for the Negro race, and pledges itself to fight for the right of self-determination for the Negroes in the South. But the Negro masses must understand that their racial and economic liberation can be achieved only in alliance with the working class, whites and blacks alike, and as a product of the victorious proletarian revolution. Daily Worker, February 26, 1929. Abridged. V.I.J. Party Work Among Blacks, 1929. Otto Hooswood's Report to Communist Party Convention. In this report to the Sixth Party Convention, Otto Hooswood, head of the newly organized Negro Department of the National Executive Committee, gives a sharply critical account of party work among Negroes. It is obvious from this report that as late as March 1921, the party was not yet successfully engaged in this area. Despite constant emphasis upon the importance of organizing Negro workers in unions and upon fighting the color bar, it is charged here that in practice little had been done, and the tool is criticized for neglect of this work. The American Negro Labor One Congress is described as a miniature duplicate of the party. Nevertheless, Hooswood reports 1 or 2 units of the party in the South with both black and white membership, and does speak of a decided improvement, generally in Negro work. The anti-church attitude is still present here. It is notable that no mention is made of the new national and self-determination line by the head of the Negro Department in his report to the First Party Convention following the adoption of the C Resolution on the Negro question. The Negro Committee for Miners' Relief was associated with the recently organized National Miners' Union of the Tool, which elected William Boyce, a Negro miner, as national vice president and carried on a campaign for organization of Negro miners. This report covers largely the period of 5 months, October 1928 February 1929, since the work of the Negro Department has been under my direction. When I took charge of the work there was no functioning Negro Department, though there was one comrade in charge. Very little connection had been established with the districts and no methods or plans devised to initiate activities throughout the party to increase our Negro membership and mobilize the entire party behind the Negro work. Most of the districts paid very little attention to this important phase of party activity and, since there was no coordination from the center and no specific instructions and advice to these various sections, no earnest attempt to work was made. Besides, most white comrades conceived of Negro work as the work of the Negro comrades. While in some districts, especially in Chicago, very good work had been done in the past and important organizational gains made, practically everything fell through and only the remnants of our former movement remained. Neglect of work. The insufficient attention paid to this work by the party as a whole resulted in very little actual organizational achievement. Because of insufficient forces and the lack of a definite and concrete program covering all the fields of activities, our policy was often confusing. As an instance, at a certain period we concentrated largely on building of the American Negro Labor Congress, ANLC. In doing so, we forgot almost altogether to draw Negro workers into the party, thereby failing to build the necessary cadres, which is the only active driving force capable of building any movement. Apart from this, our orientation was too much in the direction of the Negro intellectuals and petty bourgeois elements. In a number of districts, particularly Chicago, we took into the movement some very unstable elements who joined with the idea that there was an opportunity for personal advancement, but when confronted with the real tasks of the party, they became frightened at the risks and the work involved, and so they left the movement. Whatever progress we have made so far has been largely the result of a change in our policy in orientating ourselves to the proletarian elements. Not only that, but an attitude had developed to the effect that the party's work among Negroes was to be confined mainly to the ANLC. First program. Last April, 1928, our party for the first time drew up a program on Negro work that came nearest to fitting the situation. Since then, with the aid and criticism of the Comintern, we have orientated ourselves more and more to work among the Negro masses and have begun to take this work seriously. The political campaign of 1928 presented a very favorable opportunity to carry the program of the party to the Negro masses on a national scale. A very intensive campaign was carried on, particularly in the large cities, and for the first time, Negro workers, in many sections of the country, appeared as candidates on the communist platform, the platform of class struggle. The importance of this campaign can only be properly evaluated when we take into consideration the fact that never before did a working-class party appear openly and boldly as the champion of the Negro masses in its fight for full social equality and against lynching, segregation and all the various forms of abuses and exploitation suffered by the Negro masses. Never before did a working-class party so effectively challenge the ruling class and its political parties in its oppression, exploitation and degradation of the Negro masses. Not only in the North, but also in the South, the hotbed of reaction and race prejudice was our propaganda effective. In the heart of the lynching bee, we denounced lynching. The many meetings we held, the thousands of leaflets distributed, the special election issue of the Champion, and the very effective publicity obtained through the Crusader News Service, brought our propaganda to thousands of Negro workers who are under the influence of the bourgeoisie, white and black. And the response on the part of the Negro workers and the increase of our membership during this period indicate the possibility of drawing in large numbers into the party with systematic work. The establishment of 1 or 2 units in the South with white and Negro members in the same unit is in itself an achievement. Our main shortcoming in this respect is organizational. We did not retain all those who joined, nor did we follow up sufficiently all the contacts made. Unless definite organizational steps are taken to keep these newcomers in the party and to bring back good elements which have drifted out, our work will have been of little value. Trade union work. The trade union work among the Negro workers is the weakest aspect of our work. Not the slightest attempt has been made to launch a campaign for the organization of the hundreds of thousands of unorganized black workers. Not only do I take into consideration here the question of building new unions among the Negro workers, but also the matter of a campaign against the discrimination practiced in most unions against the Negroes and an absolute refusal of many unions to admit colored workers. In this respect, the Trade Union Educational League, TUL, has entirely neglected its duty. Not even a plan for this most important activity has been worked out. The TUL has retreated before the anti-Negro policy of the labor aristocracy of the AFL. In spite of the pledges made by the delegation of the 4th Congress of the RELU and the program adopted, they have signally failed to launch any campaign to force these unions to let down the color bar and admit Negro workers. Also, no attempt was made to include Negro trade unionists in the trade union delegation to the Soviet Union. A small beginning is being made with the attempt to organize Negro workers and to place them on leading committees in the new unions, miners, needle trades, etc. Now that a Negro department has been established in the TUL with someone, James W. Ford, in charge of the work who will work in close connection with the Negro Bureau of the Profintern, we may expect some improvement in the work in the near future. American Negro Labor Congress. The American Negro Labor Congress only exists nominally today. Organized in 1925, it has had a very precarious existence. From its inception, the policy pursued was too narrow and had the effect of stifling its growth. Very little attempt was made to make a real broad mass movement of it. It became a little sectarian group and to a certain extent a miniature duplicate of the party. The party did not pay sufficient attention to the administration of the Congress, discipline was little enforced, and the work of the comrades in charge was not checked, with the result that many grave blunders were committed without any attempt at rectification. In the last few months an attempt has been made to revive the Congress, and with some degree of success. Prior to this practically all the locals had disappeared. We were in a state of almost complete bankruptcy. Now we have functioning locals in New York with about 30 active members, Chester, Pa, 45 members, Pittsburgh, 15. Chicago, 70. Kansas City, 20, and we have organized provisional committees in a number of other cities such as Cleveland, Omaha, Denver, Seattle, St. Louis, Los Angeles, Oakland, Minneapolis, Detroit, Buffalo, New Haven, Oklahoma City. We cannot be satisfied with the ANLC in its present form. It is still too much of a propaganda sect. Our main aim must be to build a mass movement based on the industrial workers, particularly the organized workers. We must turn more to the shops and factories, and in this connection we must establish close relationship and cooperation with the tool. Our program as it is today is hardly suited to reach the masses, and the new program which is being prepared will largely correct these shortcomings. Some of our comrades in New York as well as elsewhere have had a wrong policy toward the church. Their conception of the extent to which we could utilize the Negro church is based on an underestimation of the role of the church as an instrument of imperialism. They thought that they could really make a dent in religion by boring from within. The idea of reaching the masses through the church made them forget the basic task, the work in the factories, shops, mills, and other places of employment. Our recent experiences with meetings in the churches ought to be adequate proof that we must intensify our agitation against the church, to break down the stranglehold it has on the Negro masses, and not go to the churches to win these masses. Negro Workers Relief Committee. The Negro Workers Relief Committee, which supplanted the Negro Committee for Miners Relief and was organized at the time of the Florida hurricane, has many good possibilities as a permanent relief organization. Branches are being formed in a number of districts, and the committee has recently affiliated itself with the workers. International Relief. The committee has carried on a campaign for relief of the hurricane sufferers and has effectively exposed the role of the Red Cross, with its policy of race discrimination, and as a tool in the hands of the capitalist class. Efforts will be made by the party to help make this a broad mass movement. Harlem Tenants League. The Harlem Tenants League, though still small and weak, can be built and can serve as an excellent means of drawing the Negro masses into the struggle. We must by all means make an effort to strengthen and broaden it. We should help to develop similar leagues in other large cities where Negroes are segregated and forced to pay exorbitant rents for the worst hovels. Negro Champion. After cessation for over a year, the Negro Champion is again being published by the American Negro Labor Congress. But at present it appears too irregularly. All efforts must be made to help build the Negro Champion into a mass organ. This can only be done if it appears regularly as a weekly. The paper has considerably improved, but needs a manager, in addition to the editor, who is already overburdened with other party work, and the support of the entire party. We must realize that a powerful organ is a prime necessity for the building of a real mass movement. Without this, it is extremely difficult to reach the Negro masses, who are chloroformed by both the white capitalist press and the Negro press. Crusader News Service. The Crusader News Service, which the party supports, is of great value. About 200 Negro papers receive it and use its propaganda material. The service was of inestimable value during the election campaign. Most of the Southern Negro newspapers use hardly any other source for their news material. The news material can be improved, but the beginning is a very good one. Negro Commission. The party has recently established a Negro Commission, the purpose of which is to make a thorough survey of our Negro work, to study the problems from every angle, to draw up concrete plans and to make definite recommendations and proposals for our work. The Commission has divided itself into sub-committees, with one comrade responsible for the work of each committee, so as to more effectively study the various problems, such as trade unionism, agriculture, race movements, class divisions within the Negro race, etc. The Commission has already begun its work. The findings of the Commission will be of inestimable value since we know so little of the actual facts regarding some of the problems we are confronted with in dealing with the life of the Negro race. Negro Department. A Negro Department of the Central Executive Committee has been established with one comrade in charge of the work. The task of this department is to supervise the work of the various auxiliary organizations, to direct the party's Negro work, to initiate policies and to put into effect the party's decisions on Negro work insofar as it comes within its scope. The Negro Department recently arranged a national tour for Comrade Otto Hall covering some of the most important industrial centers and cities with large Negro population. Most of the meetings were held directly under party auspices. This was the first time that mass meetings were held among Negro workers on a national scale, directly under party auspices. With few exceptions, the meetings were quite successful, with large numbers of Negro workers in attendance, and nearly 300 Negroes signed application blanks for membership in the party. We established a number of provisional committees for the American Negro Labor Congress and made contacts for the distribution of the Negro Champion. Where the party forces were mobilized, we had the most successful meetings, as, for instance, in Seattle and Buffalo. The results of this tour, more than anything else, are a proof of the fact that not only through auxiliaries, but also directly, can the party appeal to the Negro workers and organize them immediately into the party. The districts. Although most of the districts are still very slow in mobilizing the party machinery for actual work among the Negro workers, there has been recently a decided improvement. The party's work among the Negro masses is being taken much more seriously now, and an effort is being made to do something concrete to win the Negro workers for the party. The need for a determined ~D effort to carry on a thorough ideological campaign through the districts to give the party membership a better understanding of the Negro question is quite evident. The main obstacle, in the way of the membership in participating in larger numbers in this work, is their lack of understanding of the question and methods of approach. This can only be overcome if they are acquainted with the facts and when they are engaged in actual work. The recent District Negro Conference, held in New York, attended by delegates from units, active Negro comrades and white comrades active in Negro work, taking up many of the district problems, was an excellent beginning and indicates the growing realization of the importance of this phase of party work. At present 10 districts have organized Negro departments, with one comrade responsible for the activity of the departments in each district, and in some districts, like New York, many units have Negro organizers working in close cooperation with the department. In this connection, the closest cooperation between the National Negro Department and that of the districts obtains. We have at present 2 district Negro organizers, one in New York, and one in Chicago. The districts which have shown the greatest amount of activity and results recently are Kansas City, Detroit, Cleveland, Seattle, Chicago and New York. Although we have had a decided improvement in the Negro work recently and our membership has increased, the party cannot be satisfied with the work done, and the results so far obtained. One of our greatest shortcomings, and one that must be overcome immediately, is the lack of a sufficient number of trained Negro comrades who can do the proper organizational and other tasks in the districts. The development of strong Negro cadres in all sections of the country is a prerequisite to the building of a real movement among the Negro workers. The entrance of Negroes in the basic industries of the North on a large scale, creating a real proletarian element, gives us a better basis for actual organizational activities. With the industrialization of the South, large numbers of Negroes have left the plantations for urban centers and are engaged in the various industries. While we must pay immediate attention to organizing the Negroes in the industrial centers of the South, we must bear in mind that the overwhelming majority of Negroes are still on the land. We must realize that the bulk of them are tenant farmers, sharecroppers, farm laborers and peons. We have entirely neglected to do any work among the Negro farmers, and yet here is a very important field for activity that must be tackled at once. The ruthless exploitation and persecution of the Negro masses in the South, the lynching, segregation and disfranchisement which they suffer, make possible the formation of an agrarian movement which might take on the characteristics of a race movement. In such developments it will be our task to see to it that the new proletarian elements in the urban centers and the semi-proletarians on the land are the driving force in these movements in order to give them a working-class leadership. We have the following tasks facing our party in its Negro work. 1. The party must immediately launch a general organization drive for Negro membership. 2. We must immediately begin the training of cadres of Negro communists. 3. A strong ideological campaign must be carried on throughout the party against white chauvinism. 4. A campaign to organize the unorganized Negro workers in trade unions and a campaign to break down the color bar in the old unions must be launched. 5. Organization work in the South must be started immediately. A concrete program to organize the Negro farmers must be worked out. 6. The American Negro Labor Congress must be activized. Preparations must be made to call another convention of the ANLC as soon as possible. 7. After careful preparation a race congress should be called. 8. The entire party must be mobilized behind the Negro champion. 9. Increased activities must start among Negro women, youth and children. 10. The Negro problem must be a part of all party campaigns and of its auxiliary organizations. 11. The Negro masses must be mobilized against the war danger and against imperialist attacks upon the Soviet Union. The Negro press, among other means, must be utilized to the fullest possible extent for this purpose. Daily Worker, March 9 and 11, 1929. Organizing in Virginia, by Irving Keith. The following article, by a white communist seaman and organizer, is an unusually frank discussion of the problems facing the party in the South. The racism he found in the single-party unit in Norfolk was more or less typical of the few party units existing elsewhere in the South. Noteworthy are the writer's proposals for organization of the Negro workers in the South together with white in the new industrial unions of the tool, for the creation of a Southern Party district and for the launching of a Southern Party newspaper. Within the year, action was started in all three. The rapid industrialization of Virginia calls for an expansion of communist activity and a concentration of communist forces in the state. In the Tidewater district of Virginia, which embraces Norfolk and that part of the state immediately surrounding it, are quite a number of large manufacturing plants. In these plants working conditions are miserable, wages are very small and the average working day is 10 hours. General conditions. As a direct result of the very low wage scale, living conditions are almost unbearable. For the Negro workers particularly, is this true. They are forced to live in rambling shanties which have no means for either lighting or heating. For the white workers conditions are slightly better, and since the general tendency is to compare their standard of living with that of the poorest class of workers, i.e., the masses of Negro workers, they do not consider themselves in as poor a condition as they really are. No attempt has been made to establish nuclei in any of these mills. It is of the utmost importance that our party take up immediately the task of organizing nuclei in these factories and mills. Negro question. The Negro question in Virginia is acute. Discrimination, segregation and Jim Crowism are everywhere prevalent. The Negro, although exploited even more than the white worker, is not outwardly revolutionary. The Negro masses now working in the mills are the same masses who a few years ago were engaged solely in agricultural pursuits. The attitude of the masses of white workers toward the Negro is, generally, that hatred which has been instilled in them by bourgeois propaganda and teaching. There are several groups of militant Negro workers in both Norfolk and Richmond. It is of the utmost importance that the members of these militant groups be drawn into the revolutionary struggle. The masses of Negro workers in Virginia are readers of the reactionary Negro World and the Norfolk Journal and Guide. It is urgent that the Negro Champion conduct a campaign and secure as readers the masses of Negro workers in Virginia. It is also important that a special publication, dealing with the vital problems of the Southern industrial workers, agrarian laborers and tenant farmers, be issued and distributed. Composition of Norfolk Unit. There has been practically no work done in Norfolk. The Navy Yard, the naval and marine bases and the various factories and mills have not been touched. The problem of the organization of the masses of Negro workers has gone by almost unnoticed in Norfolk. The social composition of the Norfolk unit of the party is extremely bad. There is not a real proletarian element in the unit. It is a Jewish-speaking one. The worker whom the unit could claim as a member was non-Jewish and had to stop coming to meetings because he could not understand what was going on about him at the few meetings which he attended. The party unit in Norfolk has adopted a white chauvinist attitude towards the race question, and has fought all moves toward the organization of Negro workers into nuclei and units. It follows the course of least resistance and makes no effort to give the party's stand on the Negro question to the masses of workers. This can be attributed to the following reason. Since taking leadership in a movement to organize the Negroes and advocating equality of the races would bring notoriety to most of the members of the unit, and since all of these are in business and notoriety is bad for business, they are fearful of the outcome of an open policy on the Negro question. The party's invasion of Virginia in the last election campaign did not give rise to any organizational gains. In Norfolk there were 3 campaign meetings. 2 of these were arranged by the national office of the party, and the third by the district office at Philadelphia. The Norfolk section of the party did very little towards the success of these meetings. The same, I believe, is true of Richmond. Proposals. Our party must undertake the complete reorganization of the Norfolk and Richmond units. It must inaugurate an extensive campaign to organize real proletarian elements into units and nuclei, and in line with the general situation in the South, of which Virginia is partly typical, it is my opinion that the party must pay particular attention to the immediate organization of a Southern district with all the functioning departments, such as Women's Negro, Youth, and Pioneer. The Trade Union Educational League must establish itself in the South in order to draw the great masses of unorganized workers into the struggle on the industrial field. More attention must be paid to the organization of the Southern workers into the new industrial unions. Our party must analyze the conditions of the agrarian laborers and tenant farmers with a view towards laying out a problem around which we must rally these agrarian laborers and tenant farmers to the standard of our party. Editor's note: the Norfolk unit has already been reorganized because of white chauvinism. The district committee is now engaged in building a real party unit from among the workers in the basic industries, concentrating among the workers of the Navy Yard. The condition described by Comrade Keith existed, and to an extent still exists, in other party units in the South. The party is now giving attention to these units in reorganizing them and orientating itself on the Negro proletarians and the workers in the basic industries generally. Daily Worker, May 6, 1929. Organize the Negro Workers. By W.M. Z. Foster. This is the last of a series of 4 articles on the forthcoming Trade Union Educational League Convention in Cleveland, which was postponed from the announced date of June 1 to August 31, 1929. At this convention the tool became the Trade Union Unity League, with emphasis upon the organization of independent industrial unions. Foster's contention that the convention will have more significance to Negro workers than any other trade union gathering ever held in this country was not an idle boast. Some 60 Negro delegates attended, and the organization of a number of industrial unions in key branches of the economy, though comparatively small, proved to be forerunners of the great organization drives in the mass production industries of the 1930s which resulted in the CIO, and involved masses of black workers. The convention marked a significant advance in communist influence among Negro workers. One of the most important features of the Trade Union Educational League Convention to be held in Cleveland on June 1 and 2 will be the large delegation of Negro workers present. To organize the Negro proletarians, to draw them into the mainstream of the new revolutionary industrial union movement, will be a major objective of the TUEL convention. Of all the shameful treason to the working class committed by the misleaders who stand at the head of the old trade unions, none has been more disastrous than their systematic betrayal of the Negro workers. It has long been the policy of the employers to draw a line between white and black workers, to set one group against the other in order to better exploit them, to cultivate the worst forms of race prejudice among the whites. They have deliberately and systematically discriminated against the Negroes, giving them the worst work, the lowest wages, and subjecting them to the most brutal repression. AFL won't organize. Were the AFL leaders imbued with even a semblance of real working class spirit, they would take it upon themselves as a first and basic task to defeat the plans of the employers, by organizing the Negroes and by mobilizing the whole labor movement behind their elementary demands. But they refuse utterly to do this. On the contrary, true to their role as agents of the bourgeoisie in the ranks of the workers, they fall in line with the program of the employers, and join hands with them to oppress the Negroes. They cultivate race chauvinism among the whites, they prohibit Negroes from joining the unions, they cooperate with the employers to keep the Negroes at the poorest paid jobs. All this constitutes one of the most shameful pages in American labor history. Class brothers. But the TUEL convention represents the revolutionary forces that will stop this historic treachery. The convention will be made up of a body of workers of both sexes and all nationalities, of Negroes who understand and dare to strike a blow in behalf of themselves and their class, and of whites eliminating all white chauvinism from their ranks, recognize the Negro workers as class brothers, and who will fight with and for them all the way to the end for complete social emancipation. The TUEL convention will have more significance to Negro workers than any other trade union gathering ever held in this country. Negroes constantly take on more importance as a force in industry and as a potential factor in the trade union movement. During the past dozen years, hundreds of thousands of them have poured into the mills and factories. For the most part, they are going into the key and basic industries: coal, railroads, steel, meatpacking, etc., exactly those industries that play the most decisive role in the class struggle. In a recent number of the RILU Bulletin occurs the following statement quoting Carroll Binder regarding Negroes in the industries of Chicago in 1920. 30% of the labor force in the Chicago packing industry is colored. The Corn Products Company, which employed only one Negro 8 years ago, today employs 350, or 20% of its working force. Beaver's Products minus 95%. The American Hide and Leather Company was the first tannery to use Negro workers. Now all the tanneries use large numbers of them. The foundries and laundries are heavy employers of Negroes. 11% of the employees of the Pullman car shops are Negroes. Negro women compose 40% of the workers in the lampshade industry. About 20% of the 14,000 postal workers of Chicago are Negroes, etc., etc. The great importance to industry and the class struggle of this constantly increasing body of Negro workers cannot be too much stressed. It is the special task of the TUEL to organize them as part of its general work of organizing the unorganized. This can only be done in the face of studied opposition of the AFL leaders working hand in glove with the employers. Special committees. But in order that the necessary progress shall be registered by the TUEL convention in the organization of the Negro workers, real work must be done by the left forces between now and the convention. Special committees must be established in the various important industrial centers to prosecute this particular task. These committees, together with the general organizing forces of the TUEL, must establish contacts with the Negroes in all the important industrial plants and draw them into all the shop committees, TUEL groups, and other organizations formed as a basis for the convention. In every delegation from every industry where Negroes are employed, there must be a heavy percentage of these workers included. There especially must be a large delegation of Negro workers from the coal and iron mines, the steel mills, fertilizer works, railroads, the cotton and tobacco plantations, and other industries of the South. The real mass character of the TUEL convention will be measured pretty much by the number of representative Negro workers present. Good fighters. The Negro workers are good fighters. This they have proved in innumerable strikes in the coal, steel, packing, building and other industries, despite systematic betrayal by white trade union leaders and the presence of an all too prevalent race chauvinism among the masses of white workers. They are a tremendous source of potential revolutionary strength and vigor. They have a double oppression as workers and as Negroes, to fill them with fighting spirit and resentment against capitalism. It has been one of the most serious errors of the left wing to underestimate and to neglect the development of this great proletarian fighting force. Let the TUEL convention therefore be a great mobilization center for the Negro workers. There must be present Negroes from all the important plants and localities. Such a delegation, upon which the success of the convention depends, can and will be assembled. The TUEL convention will be a revolutionary signal and inspiration to the masses of Negro workers, exploited and oppressed in the mills, mines and factories of American imperialism. Daily Worker, May 16, 1929. Results of National Negro Week. By Cyril Briggs. As part of Build the Party Drive, the National Committee designated the period of May 10 to 20 as National Negro Week, in a lengthy statement issued by Cyril Briggs, Acting Director of the National Negro Department, Daily Worker, April 25, 1929. Various tasks and objectives were detailed. District local conferences were held in preparation for the occasion, attended by representatives of party units and Union Party fractions in the area. The following review of the results of National Negro Week expresses dissatisfaction with the level of party work among Negroes. It is notable that Cyril Briggs urged white communists to speak at meetings in black neighborhoods. The designation of a Negro Week, probably first attempted during the election campaign of 1928, became a regular annual event, usually during the week of Lincoln's birthday, and much later February was celebrated as Negro History Month as a national event. National Negro Week is over, but the party's Negro work has just begun. First, let us consider the party's purpose in having a National Negro Week. The communications sent to the district Negro committees by the National Negro Department before and during National Negro Week stressed that the period of May 10 to May 20 shall be National Negro Week, and shall be used for the purpose of mobilizing the entire membership behind the Negro work of the party, building the American Negro Labor Congress, the Relief Committee, the Negro Champion, organizing tenants' leagues, etc. Dramatizing struggle. It was also repeatedly pointed out that National Negro Week must be utilized for dramatizing the struggles of the Negroes and for dramatizing the support by the Communist Party of the struggle against white ruling class terrorism, against lynching, against Jim Crowism, against segregation, against disfranchisement, and for full political, social and racial equality of the Negroes. District Negro committees were instructed to send mixed groups of white and Negro workers to theaters, restaurants and other public places known to be practicing discrimination against the Negroes, and that any refusal to sell tickets to, or serve our Negro comrades, was to be utilized for a mass demonstration against these places and against the whole system of racial discrimination, with picketing of the offending places by groups of white and Negro workers. No broad agitational base. From the data at present on hand, it would appear that the campaign was practically barren of that broad agitational base sought by the national office and for which directives were sent to each district. Only in Patterson, District 2, did National Negro Week achieve that agitational base. In other parts of District 2, notably in Harlem, Section 4 of District 2, Several attempts were made to achieve this agitational base, but the first attempts proving unsuccessful in uncovering racial discrimination, the places tested having evidently changed their policies by reason of the growing pressure of the Negro population and the necessity of having to seek the Negro's trade, the matter was dropped. The Toussaint Louverture memorial meetings, held in conjunction with the ANLC, were generally badly organized and poorly attended. In District 2, with its more than 250,000 Negro population, only 2 memorial meetings were held, one in Brooklyn, which was fairly well attended, the other in Harlem. This latter was an absolute farce, with only about 75 workers present. Very few of the white comrades were present, indicating that the decision of the Communist International to the contrary, there is still a marked underestimation of Negro work in the party. The poor attendance of Negro workers can be traced to the failure of speakers to show up for the street meetings held previously to the memorial meeting. Wrong conception. The Negro comrades were particularly to blame in this respect. However, the white comrades must get over the idea that street meetings in Negro communities are absolutely impossible unless a Negro comrade is present to speak. If the white comrades will give the necessary attention to a study of the problems of the Negro masses, they will not continue to consider themselves inadequately equipped to address a meeting of Negro workers. Fairly successful meets. In Kansas City, in Boston, in Chicago, in Detroit, in Cleveland, there were fairly successful memorial meetings from an agitational viewpoint. The National Negro Department cooperated with the districts wherever requested in sending out national speakers to cover their affairs. Comrade Richard B. Moore was sent to address the memorial meetings in Boston, in Philadelphia, and also traveled to Buffalo to find that in spite of a request for a speaker, no arrangements had actually been made for a memorial meeting. Comrade Moore also spoke at the Harlem Memorial Meeting. Comrade Otto Hall spoke at 2 memorial meetings in the South, where for the first time the party and the ANLC are penetrating on a healthy basis, drawing in proletarian elements of both races and discarding the professional and petty business element which heretofore hindered the party's growth in the South. In sharp contrast with the failures of the campaign and the poor attendance at the memorial meetings, was the methodical arrangement and splendid success of the Negro Champion Dinner in District 2. Over 500 persons were present at this dinner, where $500 in cash was raised for the Negro Champion, with over $1,500 pledged by various organizations and individuals. The dinner was a success both agitationally and financially. Department failings. Of course, the National Negro Department had its failings, too. The department fell down in the matter of getting out the Negro Champion in time for distribution at and before the memorial meetings. The department should also have printed an ANLC leaflet and a party leaflet for national distribution among the Negro masses during National Negro Week, but here again the lack of funds was a decisive factor. They must, however, share the blame for the failure to get out these leaflets. Our party must learn by these mistakes, and in the task of pushing our work among the Negro masses we must seek to benefit by our past mistakes and experiences. National Negro Week is over, but our Negro work has just begun. We must mobilize every district, every section and every unit for full, active participation in the struggles of the Negro masses. We must increasingly intensify and dramatize the struggles of the Negro masses. Daily Worker, June 9, 1929. Our Negro Work. By Cyril Briggs. This is the sharpest and most outspoken critique of racism in the organization to appear in an official party organ. The author credits the 6th Congress resolution with bringing about a turn towards serious party work among Negroes, and especially with launching an aggressive fight against racism in the party, which he considers the main obstacle to effective Negro work. Failure to promote blacks to leading positions and to consult them on policy. Briggs holds, led to leftist blunders which marked the birth of the American Negro Labor Congress, and such other blunders as repudiation of social equality for Negroes by a party convention in New York City. He notes the detrimental effect of the factional struggle in preventing effective criticism and action with respect to racism in the party, but he does see marked improvement since the 6th Congress, especially in the promotion of Negro cadre. There were now 5 black members of the National Committee, 2 of whom were elected to the Political Committee, the highest party body, and equivalent action in the regional and local party committees. For reference to James W. Ford at 6th Congress, see his speech above. The address to the American Party from the C, May 1929, repudiated the Lovestone faction, which had appealed against an earlier open letter of the C Executive Committee to the 6th Convention of the American Party in March 1929, favoring the Foster Group. The author uses the term bridge organization to denote groups such as the American Negro Labor Congress, which are intended to reach outward from the party to the masses. The reference to the union in the needle industry is to the Needle Trades Workers Industrial Union, an affiliate of the TUL and then the TUUL. In attempting to evaluate the work of our party among the Negro workers and farmers during the past 10 years, it is necessary to begin with the frank admission that the task of winning the Negro masses to our program as seriously and sincerely taken up only since the Sixth World Congress. Most of our Negro work prior to the Congress was of a sporadic nature, intended in the main as gestures for the benefit of the Comintern. In its resolution on the Negro question in the United States, the Sixth Congress correctly pointed out that the Negro masses will not be won for the revolutionary struggles until such time as the most conscious section of the white workers show, by action, that they are fighting with the Negroes against all racial discrimination and persecution. This is just what we did not seriously essay in the years preceding the Sixth Congress. And it is significant that the Negro membership of the party experienced its first real growth with the application of the Comintern line and exactly in proportion as when and where it was applied. Prior to the Sixth Congress, white chauvinism in the American Party, in both factions, smiley face unmasked at that Congress by Comrade Ford, and mercilessly condemned by that supreme revolutionary body, made progress in Negro work well nigh impossible. The Sixth Congress recognized this and in its resolution on the Negro question laid down the line for a relentless struggle against white chauvinism in the American Party. White chauvinism manifests itself in a general underestimation of the importance of the role of the Negro masses in the revolutionary struggles, in open or concealed opposition to doing work among the Negroes, in thinly veneered antagonism to Negro comrades and sympathizers, in failure to carry on anything but the most sporadic and feeble activities among these masses, in failure to come out openly and continually as the champion of the Negro masses in their racial and economic struggles, in failure to prosecute the fight in the reactionary trade unions for the removal of the color bar, in failure to mobilize and rally the broad masses of the white workers for active participation in the struggles of the Negro masses, in failure to draw capable Negro comrades into responsible and leading positions in the party, in the left-wing unions, in the party auxiliaries, and in trying to excuse the failure to push the Negro comrades to the front with the rotten slander that existing Negro cadres are totally incapable and undeveloped. White chauvinism has in the past not only prevented the party from carrying on an aggressive and persistent campaign to win the Negro masses to the communist program, but was responsible for many costly mistakes in our approach to these masses. The tendency in the past was to ignore the leading Negro comrades when formulating policies on Negro work. This manifestation of white chauvinism led not only to the leftist blunders which marked the birth of the ANLC and, on this and other occasions, marred our approach to the Negro masses, but even to policies so utterly uncommunist as opposition to the spontaneous mass migration from the South of hundreds of thousands of Negroes on the rotten social democratic and AF of L. Argument that the coming north of these workers would hurt the economic position of the northern white workers and result in the sharpening of racial antagonism with resultant race riots. As punishment for their opposition to the gargantuan stupidity, the older Negro comrades were refused further support, $5 or $6 a week for postage, in getting out the weekly news service which was being sent out to some 300 Negro newspapers, and were absolutely ignored in the formation of the New Bridge organization. The bourgeois trick of utilizing the least militant of the oppressed race was reflected in the party at this period. At about this same time the party, at a convention in New York City, went out of its way to repudiate social equality for the Negro, an act which was given wide publicity in the capitalist press and, of course, quoted extensively by the Negro press, thus in one breath of astounding asininity, destroying much of the good work done by our news service, leaflets and speakers. Another example of the wrong policies engendered by the influence of white chauvinism in the party is found in the circumstances which led up to Comrade Hoosewood's defiance of the party caucus at the Farmer Labor Convention in 1925 in taking the floor to answer an attack on the Negro masses by a Southern delegate. The party, instead of censuring the fraction for failure to answer this attack on the Negro masses and for further refusing Comrade Hoosewood permission to answer, accepted the fraction's opportunist view that a defense of the Negro workers would have antagonized the Southern delegates. The Sixth World Congress completely exonerated Comrade Hoosewood and censured the party for its support of the fraction's attitude. A similar incident occurred at the Miners' Conference in Pittsburgh when one of the most active Negro comrades was disciplined for his insistence in bringing before the conference the tabooed question of Negro work. In addition to being hampered and sabotaged by chauvinistic tendencies in the party, the Negro work, like the trade union work, anti-imperialist work, etc., further suffered as a result of the unprincipled factional struggle which was eating at the very vitals of our party and with which the Comintern very properly and effectively dealt in the address. The impossibility of any real Bolshevik self-criticism during the bitter factional struggle permitted white chauvinism to stalk unchallenged in the highest committees of the party and gained factional protection for those comrades exposed as white chauvinists. It is not my intention to give the impression that no work at all was done before the 6th Congress. The party led the Negro Fig and Date Workers' Strike in Chicago, the Laundry Strike in Carteret, NJ, the Colored Moving Picture Operators' Strike in New York. In addition, we organized the Negro Miners' Relief Committee, captured the Tenants League from the Socialists, held classes and forums in New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, etc. But the work was sporadic and therefore bound to be ineffective. Since the 6th Congress much has been done to correct the shortcomings of our Negro work. The instructions of the Communist International to push the Negro comrades to the front in party work have been carried out on a large scale. At both the party and the Young Communist League conventions, Negro delegates were present in large numbers and took a leading part in the work of both conventions, serving on all leading committees, presiding over sessions, etc. Negro comrades were elected to the highest body in the party, the Central Committee, and to the National Executive Committee of the League. Negro comrades were also elected to the party's Politburo and to the National Bureau of the League. Negro comrades have been added to district committees, section committees, etc. An ideological campaign against white chauvinism was carried on in the party. Press and in all units of the party during National Negro Week in May of this year. In addition to this all too brief ideological campaign, sharp organizational measures have been taken against several comrades who were exposed as white chauvinists. In Seattle, Washington, several comrades who objected to the presence of Negro workers at party dances were expelled. In addition, the Central Committee expelled plus ed a number of comrades who, when the vote was taken in the unit to which the offending comrades belonged, voted against expulsion. In Norfolk, Virginia, most of the white members of a party unit were expelled for refusal to admit the Negro comrades to their meetings. And in making the Norfolk expulsions, the party showed its Negro face by sending Comrade Hall to Virginia as CEC representative to act in the matter. In the TUEL, a basis for trade union work among the Negro proletariat has been laid, and some work in this direction begun. A Negro department has been organized with Comrade Hall at its head. In addition, Comrade Hall was sent on tour for the Trade Union Unity Convention with the aim of mobilizing the Negro workers for that convention. White the party and TUEL have begun to orientate toward the Comintern and RILU line on mobilizing the Negro workers for the class struggle. The left-wing unions under our leadership have done very little to win the confidence of these workers, the Gastonia fraction being an honorable exception, with all its mistakes and wobblings, to this general indictment. Especially criminal is the apathy of the needle trades comrades and their general attitude toward the Negro workers, an attitude which has made it impossible for their union to retain the Negro workers, which it only organizes in times of strikes. While this union has scores of functionaries, with departments for Greek, Italian, Jewish, etc., workers, it has not a single Negro functionary and no department concerned even remotely with the organization of Negro workers. This, in spite of the fact that there are several thousand Negro workers in the needle trades in New York City alone. In the miners' union, the same underestimation is present. In spite of the existence of excellent, militant material plus the fact that the number of Negro miners is very large, in some fields outnumbering the white miners, the union has not yet appointed a single Negro field organizer. That there is still urgent need for sharpening the struggle against white chauvinism, both ideologically and organizationally, is demonstrated by the present unhealthy situation in District 8, Chicago, where as a result of much blundering and lack of political direction, a distinctly anti-party attitude developed some months ago among the Negro comrades when Cruz, then D.O. district organizer, decided that the district could not pay wages to a Negro functionary. For the failure to energetically fight and unmask these tendencies of white chauvinism in the party, the Negro comrades are themselves largely to blame. Often, however, it happens that the Negro comrades involved are new members of the party and are not aware of the decisive stand taken by the Communist International and its American section against white chauvinism, and merely come to the conclusion that the Communist Party, instead of being a party of internationalism and working-class solidarity, is, just like the Republican, Democratic and Socialist parties, in the reaction of its members to the race question. White chauvinism must be rooted out of our party. The petty bourgeois elements who are the ones most responsible for this manifestation within our ranks of the influence of the imperialist ideology must be dealt with sharply. It can be shown that they are sabotaging the party's Negro work or exhibiting other indications of white chauvinism. Comrades should play a leading role in the task of white chauvinists in cleansing our party of these elements. The Negro exposing the undesirable. The Communist, September 1929, abridged. The October Plenum, by Otto Huswood. This review of the October plenary meeting of the Central Executive Committee is of particular significance because it reveals the harm done by factionalism to the party's Negro work, and indicates the turn now being made toward serious and systematic consideration of various aspects of that work by a leading party body. Among the most important points made is the realization that the entire party must be engaged in not only the Negro members in all questions pertaining to the Negro, especially in the struggle against racism in the party as well as in the labor movement. The proposal that the American Party take the initiative in organization of the workers in the West Indies is of interest. The reference to the right danger relates to the emphasis upon the need to fight the opportunism of the right variety as the main inner danger facing the party, a position adopted at the 6th Congress and directed in the United States against Lovestone and his followers. The paralysis of the party during the many years of a vicious and unprincipled factional strife is best exemplified in the almost total neglect of activities among Negro workers, in the very small number of Negroes in the party and in the general underestimation of Negro work by the party members. Heretofore the Negro question was the political football at party plenums and conventions, each fraction charging the other with underestimation, neglect, incorrect political approach and willful sabotage of Negro work. Factional blindness and factional corruption aided materially in the party's shortcomings and neglect of work among the Negro masses. It was a deterrent to a careful analysis of the Negro question, the formulation of a correct program and the execution of decisions. Even decisions of the Comintern and the Red International of Labor Unions were sidetracked on one excuse or another. A remarkable difference in this respect was the last Central Executive Committee plenum, recognizing the importance of the role of the Negro workers in the class struggle. The Negro question received its due share of attention in the plenum discussion. For the first time a special report on Negro work was made and discussed at a party plenum, and a thesis on Negro work presented and adopted. But consideration of the party's Negro work was not confined or limited to the special report. It was an integral part of the entire plenum reports and discussions, the political report, the report on trade union work, the report on the 10th plenum of the Executive Committee of the Communist International, all dealt concretely with the various phases of the condition of the Negro masses, and the role of the party as the leader of the Negro workers against capitalist oppression and exploitation. As an indication of the serious effort concretely to understand and properly to evaluate the various phases of the Negro question, and to base our program and action on a sound perspective, was the attempt at a thoroughgoing analysis of the conditions facing the Negro in the South. This was the first effort to carefully examine the effects of industrialization of the South on the Negro. The extent of Negro migration from the farms to the southern cities, the induction of Negroes into the basic industries of the South, the effects of rationalization on the Negro workers, the extent to which Negro women have been drawn into the industries of the South and the miserably low wages paid both Negro men and women for the heaviest and dirtiest tasks, were given considerable attention. Likewise an effort was made to study the problem confronting the millions of Negro tenant farmers, sharecroppers and farm laborers who are under the complete domination of the white landlords and are virtually slaves on the land. On the basis of the analysis of this situation, a concrete program for work in the South was drawn up. One of the main points discussed at the plenum and one that received particular attention was white chauvinism. The serious menace of race prejudice, which is an expression of the ideological influence of the bourgeoisie among the white workers, and which has penetrated the ranks of the Communist Party, was readily realized. The many cases which have cropped up recently indicate the beginning of real work of the party among the Negro masses. For in the measure that the Par-Y actively engages in Negro work will we find the latent prejudice of white comrades coming to the fore, expressing itself in open hostility, sabotage, or general indifference to Negro work. That the plenum realized the danger of white chauvinism and the disastrous effect it will have upon recruiting Negro workers into our party was evident by the considerable discussion of this subject on the part of all the reporters and from the floor. That the party must immediately launch thorough and persistent ideological campaigns against white chauvinism as a part of its struggle against the right danger, and take drastic organizational measures against comrades guilty of such, as has been done in some cases, was the expressed attitude of the plenum. A new field for party activities, the West Indies, was also discussed. While some steps have already been undertaken in this direction, work among the masses of the West Indies must seriously be considered and practical steps taken toward organizing these low-paid and terribly exploited workers, the bulk of whom are Negroes. Oppressed, brutally exploited, paid a miserable pittance for their toil, These colonials will be an important link in the revolutionary chain of Latin America and the West Indies. And it is the duty of our party to take the initiative in organizing these workers and leading them in the struggle against world imperialism. The plenum was confronted with the task of making the entire party conscious of the tremendous importance of Negro work. The mobilization of the entire party behind the party's program on Negro work, instead of confining this phase of party activity to Negro comrades only, was determined by the plenum as a prerequisite to reaching the Negro masses with our propaganda and drawing them into the party. The party is faced with a number of immediate and concrete tasks in developing the Negro work. The development and training of a strong party cadre of Negroes in the districts is essential for the prosecution of the work. Negro comrades must be drawn into all the leading committees of the party so that they may participate fully in the life and activities of the party. A persistent ideological campaign must be carried on throughout the party against white chauvinism. Energetic steps must be taken to organize the unorganized Negro industrial and farm workers. All auxiliary committees must immediately begin organizational work among the Negro masses. Daily Worker, November 1, 1929. Winning the Negro Masses in Detroit. By Robert Woods. This item indicates the preliminary work being done by communists in organizing white and Negro workers together in the auto industry, which paved the way for the great unionization drive of the 1930s and the influx of black workers into the Union. Detroit and surrounding automobile centers, like many northern industrial cities, have witnessed during the past few years a tremendous influx of Negroes, migrating from the South, their number in Detroit at present estimated to be around 100,000. A very large percentage is working in the automobile factories, where, as everywhere else, they are given the most menial and lowest paid jobs. Jim Crowism in restaurants, theaters, etc. is common practice. They are living under the most rotten housing conditions. On several occasions those Negro workers have shown their readiness to carry on a militant fight against the intense economic and racial discrimination. The district plenum, following the October national plenum of the party, correctly characterized the neglect of our work among the masses of Negro workers as part of the right danger, recognizing that the Communist Party cannot win the support of the majority of the working class without winning the support of the most exploited section of this working class. In our campaign to organize the automobile workers, in our unemployment campaign, and in all our struggles, the slogan of full social, political and economic equality for Negro and white workers must be prominently put forward. Retreat in face of opposition of white workers cannot be tolerated, and when the well-known question, "What would you do if a Negro wanted to marry your sister?" is asked, we must not only state that we would not resent it, but that we welcome such interracial marriages, as a step towards breaking down the capitalist-instilled antagonisms between the different sections of the working class. Only by fearlessly defending our principles will we win the confidence of the proletariat. The party is preparing for an intensive recruiting drive. The success of this drive must be measured by the number of Negro workers that we will recruit into the party. Our activity among the Negro workers will be a barometer as to what extent we can call ourselves a Bolshevist party. Our fight against the right danger must be measured by the extent to which we fight white chauvinism. Party membership and white chauvinist ideas are incompatible. White chauvinism in our party means a capitalist agency that works within our ranks. Out with it, and forward to a Leninist Bolshevik party. Daily Worker, November 2, 1929. Negro miners in Illinois strike. By James Ford, National Organizer, Negro Department, TUUL. James W. Ford became head of the Negro Department, which was established at the founding convention of the Trade Union Unity League in August. The note of militant Negro-white unity struck here was a portent of the great battles to come during the Depression decade. The stock market crash of October 1929 mirrored the economic crisis which had already begun in production. The Southern Illinois miners' strike must be spread. Every available force in the minefields must be thrown into the fray against the police, gunmen and thugs and the state militia forces of the capitalist coal barons in order to win the struggle for better wages and working conditions, for a shorter working week, and against the speed-up and rationalization. For the building of a militant miners' union that stands for the complete equality of Negro workers, that is against racial discrimination, that turns the fighting capacities of the Negro workers into one solid phalanx against the capitalist oppressors. Illinois has long been the scene of bloody class battles of the coal miners. It is upon the clear-cut issue of class struggle and class solidarity that the Negro miners must face the present situation in Illinois. American capitalists face the severest crisis in the history of the country. The stock market crash has set all industry trembling, class battles are raging in all sections of the country. The full interest of the working class struggle demands that the white workers stand shoulder to shoulder with the Negro workers, that those who hold any vestige of race hatred throw it overboard, that they break down all barriers that keep black and white workers apart, that they put one solid front to the bosses, struggling not only for equal conditions and equal wages but for still better conditions and still higher wages. The labor fakers, in line with President Green of the AFL, agree with the program announced by Hoover of class peace between the workers and the bosses, for peace in industry. They ask the workers not to strike for higher wages, nor to struggle against wage reductions. They go further with regards to Negro workers. They fail to promise them anything. They discriminate against them. They deny them equal conditions and opportunities. In the state legislature of Illinois are several Negro legislators who have been placed there by the votes of poor Negro workers. Now these workers find themselves deceived. These Negro legislators are agents of the capitalists. They have not raised one finger to prevent the use of state troops against the black and white miners. The National Miners Union, the leader in the Illinois strike, is committed to the principle of equality and equal conditions for Negro workers, of struggle against racial discrimination. The Trade Union Unity League, of which the National Miners Union is a section, fights assiduously and relentlessly against lynching, Jim Crowism, discrimination and race prejudice. It stands for the complete and full racial, social, economic and political equality of the Negro race, for class solidarity of all workers, against the capitalist bosses, their agents, and against the whole capitalist system. The TUUL recognizes in the Communist Party the only political party of the working class. The Communist Party is always in the forefront. Daily Worker, December 14, 1929. Trade Union Unity League. This section is excerpted from the Trade Union Unity League program adopted at its August convention. Its predecessor, the TUUL, had been sharply criticized for its neglect of the Negro workers. But the August convention was well attended by Negro delegates, and for the first time a Negro department was established. The program given here was to prove effective in the new phase of union organization. The inclusion of the self-determination slogan, which was rarely mentioned in party documents, is notable. The use of the term, social fascist, to designate certain labor leaders already indicates the leftism, which was to characterize the party in the early 1930s. For the rights of Negroes, the TUUL conducts an aggressive struggle in defense of the Negro workers. These are the most oppressed, exploited and persecuted section of the entire working class. The advancement of the workers generally is inseparably bound up with the advancement of the Negroes. Every blow struck at the Negroes by the bosses is a blow at the whole working class. The TUUL has as one of its most fundamental program demands the fight for full racial, political and social equality and the right of national self-determination for Negroes. It makes relentless war against lynching, Jim Crowism, and discrimination of all kinds against Negroes. It roots out the race prejudice of chauvinism of white workers against Negroes. The TUUL demands the fullest participation and leadership of Negro workers in all the organizations and movements of the working class. It exposes the systematic betrayal of the Negroes by the fascist and social fascist labor leaders. The TUUL organizes Negroes into the new industrial unions with the white workers on the basis of the fullest equality. In the old unions, it combats all discriminatory practices aimed against Negroes. It demands the admission of Negroes into these unions and, where this admittance cannot be accomplished, and where there are no revolutionary unions, it organizes separate unions for Negroes. The TUUL Negro Department connects up the fight of the Negro workers in this country with the worldwide struggle of the Negro race through the International Negro Labor Bureau of the RILU. The TUUL endorses and supports the general work of the American Negro Labor Congress. The Trade Union Unity League. Its program, structure, methods and history, pamphlet, New York, N.D. But probably end of 1929.